get one was just for you, Bob.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the joint Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance budget hearings for fiscal year 2014 for the town of Fairfield. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm going to ask one of our selectmen, Mr. Kevin Kiley, to lead us in the pledge this evening.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. All right. This evening's meeting is in question and answer format for our board, and we have two items tonight. What we refer to as the miscellaneous, or are the not-for-profit organizations that receive some form of funding from the town, as well as the other section of the budget we're going to hear tonight is referred to as culture and recreation. And included in culture and recreation is the library and many of our recreation areas, Penfield Pavilion, Parks and Recreation, the waterfront, and the two golf courses. There's a lot of people here in the audience tonight, and we do recognize public comment at these hearings after each and every department is reviewed, as well as the not-for-profits. I would ask, though, a couple things during public comment. Number one, you need to come up to a microphone, identify yourself and your address, so that we can get you on the record and we can record you for posterity on TV. Number two, we ask that you be brief in your comments. And number three, we ask that you try not to be redundant in your comments with people that have gone before you, which just adds time to already pretty lengthy meetings. Number four, it is a comment section of our meeting. It's not questions. So we do not bring our guests here, our department heads here, to answer questions from the public at these meetings. They're readily available through email and through phone call directly. But it's not a time to question them. It's a time to make your comment regarding the budget that we've just heard. There's also, for scheduling purposes, this is the fourth or fifth year, might even be longer at this point, that we're holding a strictly public comment session, and that's this Saturday morning at the Senior Center. And it is our opportunity to just listen to the public. You'll have to listen to me a little bit in organizing the meeting, and perhaps, should they want, Board of Finance members might make comments at the end relative to some of the comments that they've heard from the public. But that's a very effective way, and a session we added many years ago to allow people that can't come to these hearings, need to gather their thoughts after attending one of these hearings, or quite frankly just can't come out at night. That's their opportunity to address our body so that we understand exactly what's on the mind of the public. There's also been, as I mentioned at the last meeting, plethora of email, pro and con, cut the budget, don't cut the budget, cut funding here, don't cut funding there. On behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to let you know that we do read those emails. We do listen to the public. We do solicit the input. However, due to the volume of them, it's very difficult to respond to each and every one of them, particularly when you're going through about 14 budget nights through the course of this month. So if we don't get back to you immediately, please do not take that as a sign that we're ignoring the comments. I know, in speaking for everybody, that we do read them and listen to them, and on occasion try to answer them as best we can. With that, I'll ask if there's any questions or comments from board members before we turn to the not-for-profit section. One item, as promised at the last meeting, I did have the opportunity this afternoon to meet with the first selectman and the chief fiscal officer to discuss some of the adjustments that Mr. Tetra had alluded to in an op-ed piece that was published earlier this week. Those numbers are not finalized as of right now. Things are being reviewed, but it was a very productive meeting, and as soon as I have more information to share with the board that's more concrete in nature, I will certainly do that, and we can move forward from there. Mr. Tetra, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, thank you, Mr. Flynn. I think that covers it, and as we're finalizing those, I think those will be positive contributors to our discussion.
Great, thank you. At this point, I want to recognize one of our board members, Mr. Chris DeWitt, who headed up a subcommittee, not just of our board, but made up of many town bodies, representatives from many town bodies, that reviewed the process by which the town determines what not-for-profit organizations get some form of funding from the town and what type of funding they may get. The goal was not to necessarily reduce funding, cut funding. It was to evaluate the process, because there's many, many not-for-profit organizations within the community that provide vital roles. And when we're spending taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure that we're supporting those not-for-profit organizations that actually augment the services or replace services that the town would otherwise have to provide. So, Mr. DeWitt, you asked for some time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked for just a moment of personal preference because of the not-for-profit committee that I serve on as chairman. Mr. Brockfeld serves on, as does Mrs. McCarthy-Vahue, who doesn't seem to be here right this second. And I think I can speak for the entire committee. Our committee's charter is to look at the process by which we process the not-for-profit entities, how we're going to go forward with that. We're going, as soon as this budget season is over, we're going to start having meetings with the first selectman again, really establish a process for everything going forward. I just wanted to make clear to everyone that we wear two hats, right? So if I have this chairmanship of this not-for-profit committee, that's one hat. But as a Board of Finance hat, any comments that are made by anyone on my committee to possible reductions, eliminations, additions to not-for-profit entities, I just want to understand, make sure everyone's clear that that is not anything to do with advocacy. I think through the process, all our committee realizes that there are some great not-for-profit entities we support. But this is a tough year. If you've been listening, we've been asking every department head where he or she may be able to cut. So I just wanted to take this few seconds that say that we're wearing our Board of Finance hats tonight. So anything that's said as far as not-for-profits, if anything is said, and I don't know that it will be, is definitely has nothing to do with advocacy. It just has to do with, frankly, the budget before us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. With that, I'm going to ask everyone on our boards to turn to page 96 in our budget book, and we're just going to do a page flip. We did not ask for presentations from the not-for-profits. We've heard them a number of years in a row. We do have 1 to 2 page write-ups on all the not-for-profits. We did have a committee that studied what all these not-for-profits do for the town. So what we're going to do is take a page flip through them, and if there's questions or comments on any particular not-for-profit, if the representative, if they're here, could come up to the microphone, would greatly appreciate that. If not, there's no need for any presentations, but of course anyone is welcome to speak as we flip through all the not-for-profits. So page 96 is a Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership, RISAP. Is there any questions from board members on this budget? Seeing none, we'll move right now to the Pequot Library. And I knew the new director's here, and I just want to recognize her and ask her if she could come out and introduce herself, considering she is new since last year. So feel free. Please have a seat. Have a seat and
Hi, I'm Martha Lord, and I am the new director at the Pequot Library. I've been here a little over 7 months.
Great. Thank you, Martha. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the work your organization does. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the Pequot Library request for funding? Mr. Walsh.
How are you doing this evening?
Fine, thanks.
We're in a particularly difficult budget season where the town's looking at a 6.4% tax increase as we sit here today. That's before us that we're going through. And I've been asking every department head, advising that there might be tax, in order to make the tax hike more affordable to our taxpayers, that as I'm sitting here, I don't think that that tax increase is an affordable amount to the taxpayer. So therefore, they may be seeing a budget decrease in certain areas. And I've asked almost every single department head that's been before us, what would be an area if we had to cut, how would that affect the services that you supply? Now, I'm asking you that same question. I mean, you get a fairly large amount of our nonprofit donations. So I guess if you could direct how your services that you supply to the citizens of Fairfield, how would they be affected if there was some type of cut in your budget?
Right now, every dollar that we've received from the town of Fairfield is critical to our operation. And we have a situation where we have had no salary increases. We've cut our staff by over 25% in the last few years. And when you have only 12 people remaining, it's a very small base to start trying to cut from. And to retain the quality of service and employees that we have. We have 5 full-time employees and 7 part-time employees. We also have a historic building that is has a lot of deferred maintenance and underfunded capital situation, and so it would be very difficult for us to cut.
Okay. And I'm not directing this, just so you know, specifically to you. It's I'm going to be asking everyone, and I have been
Okay.
throughout the course of it,
Yeah.
because it's some very difficult choices that this board has before us.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Quick question for me, following up on, hello, how are you?
This is Bill Russell.
Bill, nice
Hi,
to meet you. Nice to see
Bill
you.
Russell, President of the Board of Pequot Library. I've had the pleasure of speaking in front of this committee several
Yes.
times.
Bill, welcome back. And
you.
Thank you for the work you do. I didn't mean to slight you by not recognizing you earlier. Quick question for you, based on what you just said. Given the cost reductions that you've already done at the library, what's your operating budget come down from? What was it previously and what is it now? The reason I ask is because the funding has remained relatively flat from the town. So the funding, you must have had funding challenges from other areas?
Yeah, so we've had several funding challenges over the past several years, and unfortunately, over the past several years, we've had to periodically go into our relatively modest endowment to fund those gaps. This will be the first year, we hope, that we'll be able to say that we won't have had to go into our endowment. That's the same thing as, like drawing on any endowment. You have a budgetary loss that you're trying to meet. So as Martha has laid out, several of the steps that we've taken in the past couple of years, it really is to make up that gap and get us to the point of being not profitable per se. Our role is to take what we can, the money we can raise in partnership with the money that we raise from that we are given from the town, and turn that into services into the community. But I think most of the work that we've been doing is really on trying to, minimize that gap, reduce that gap.
Has there been a shortfall in funding from other sources? Have revenues?
Oh, well, just like everybody in this room, the 2008-2009 period was a terrible decrease in funding. We saw a significant reduction in the donation. So as you know, Mr. Chairperson and the rest of the board, 2/3 of our budget we raise ourselves, right?
Yeah,
1/3 we
right.
get from the town. And the town has been tremendously supportive of us, and that, as you noted, that annual gift has been flat for the last several years. The rest of the money that we receive has decreased for sure. Donations have gone down. The number of donors have gone down. The average size of the donor has gone down.
Right.
And it's been incumbent upon the board and our volunteers to go out into the community and figure out other ways to raise money. That has resulted in a net shortfall for us for the last several years. We've had to cover that by going into our endowment, which we do not like to do.
Right.
But, over time, again, as Martha laid out several of the steps we've taken, we've been able to begin to reduce that gap.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Brockfeld.
Thanks. Thanks for coming this evening. Let me just pile on. Let me follow on Mr. Flynn's. Let me.
Once again, did I say welcome? No.
Flynn's point, which could you just tell us, because he asked for some numbers, I didn't hear any. So the budget says here is $1,262,000 this year. What was the budget, say, over the last, I don't know if you have it in front of you, maybe you do, but over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, what is the budget? I think, Tom, that's kind of what you were asking. What's the budget been?
It's a good follow-up.
If you have it, either in actual or at least close to actual terms.
It's been fairly flat, and
Yeah.
last year is a fairly flat situation.
Let me ask you a
So,
second.
Mr. Profilo, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
let us
Right.
get an answer back to the committee in writing, which we'd be able to articulate it better.
Okay.
So I think if you looked at the budget from an expenses perspective, you'd say it's been relatively flat for the last several years.
Right.
That's because we've been plugging the gap.
That's going to be my second question. And then the
Exactly.
second question is what is your size of your endowment?
So today, it's,
About approximately $2.6 million.
Really?
And we've been withdrawing.
Ms. Lord, if
over-
you could speak into the mic, please.
Sorry. We've been having drawdowns of over, in the range of 10%, which we know is not sustainable
Yeah.
on a long-term basis.
Right, so that kind of answers my question. So you're saying you had to
We're
take about
plugging the
$250,000
hole,
out of
exactly.
there in order to plug the hole?
But
Yes.
here's what I don't, can I?
Yeah, please.
Here's what I don't understand
a
on that,
follow-up to
and,
that.
and seeing the numbers over a few-year period would help. Your opening comments indicated that you've actually had to lay off staff, and you've actually had to reduce expenses. If you've actually had to reduce expenses, I don't know how the budget could be flat year over year.
Well, the additional expenses relative to repairs and on healthcare and all of the things, utilities, all
Right.
of those things have been continuing to go up.
So it's basically the overall spending hasn't gone up, but the mix of spending has has
Absolutely.
actually changed.
That's right.
Okay, and you foresee that mix changing into next year as well?
Continuing to grow, yes. I mean, our healthcare costs and
Right.
everything else are going up, yes.
I think seeing a write-up of that would be helpful to us so that we understand it, and thank you for that explanation.
Can I just-
Mr. Brockfield,
Thank you.
please.
And then the other question, totally unrelated, is in your presentation here, you're talking about the books and items that are checked out, by the other two libraries from you guys, and then conversely. And maybe the head of our regular library might have to answer this question. I'm just curious. It says here, Pequot items checked out at Main and Woods, almost 13,000, right? How many items do you know are checked out at Main and Woods in general? Does anybody have an answer to that? Like, total?
Our total circulation was 1,012,000 for the main library and the branch library last year.
Oh, so over 1 million?
Yeah.
Okay, so that puts the 13,000 in perspective. That's what I'm trying to understand. Okay. Thank you.
Great, I'm going to go to Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to you both. You mentioned before that you have a endowment of approximately $2.6 million at the present time, correct? And you've had to draw upon that at the rate of 10% to meet operating expenses to cover shortfalls for various reasons, correct? If you didn't have to use that money for operating expenses, what would it be used for, that endowment money? What specific purpose does that money serve?
Yeah, so we think, on balance, the right drawdown from our endowment on an annual basis is 3 to 4%. That, in the non-for-profit world, would be considered a very healthy draw on the endowment and would allow you to, with reasonable rates of return on your endowment, increase that endowment slightly, over time. What we use the endowment for is two main purposes, what we should be using it for. One is a piece of that 3 to 4% should be used to fund operating costs, right? And the other is capital expenditures. So we are blessed to have an 120-year-old, historically significant building. But as Martha said, like any of us who live in antique homes, I mean, it comes with a significant amount of costs. So ideally, that's what we'd be spending it on every year. Now, as Martha noted, that's had to increase to 7 to 10% a year to cover operating costs the last 3 to 4 years.
You mentioned the capital expenses. Given the fact that you're in a historic building, is there any grant money or any federal or state funding that's available to you because you're in an historic building?
I don't know if
Historically, I don't believe that the library has obtained that type of funding. Whether or not it's available, I haven't had a chance to research that further.
Thank you.
But we will.
Mr. Tetra, is there any way that the town could help with that in terms of finding out if there's any grants available for the library, for Pequot?
We'd be glad to assist.
Okay, great. Thank
And
you.
Ms. Lord, perhaps we can pick that up
Thank you.
when you're back.
All right, are there any other questions, comments from board members? And just so that everybody doesn't think we're picking on Pequot Library, it's a $350,000 request before us, so it's substantially more than many of the other not-for-profits.
You know, we've had a series of conversations with members of the board. We've had conversations with Mr. DeWitt, and as we've maintained, we welcome these discussions. We welcome these conversations. We are incredibly thankful for the donations we get, but we do believe that taking those the gift from the town combined with the donations we're able to raise on our own, net provide a benefit for the town.
Yeah.
The other thing is that in terms of cutting, we were at $380,000 in 2009.
Right. Thank you. And thank you for the commentary. Thanks for everything that you do for the library. And welcome aboard and best of luck to you. All right. Let's go to page 102 and 103, Fairfield Counseling Services. Mr. DeWitt, I know through your work and your committee's work, Mr. Brockfeld as well, are very familiar with some of these, so if you have anything to add, feel free, please.
Thank you.
So do we have any questions, comments on Fairfield Counseling Services? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the Discovery Museum, page 104 and 105. Question, comments on the Discovery Museum? Okay, seeing none. Yes, please, Mr. Stone.
It's just a general question, because it came up last year. Are there some of these charities that we are required to give and some that we're not?
Mr. DeWitt, can you,
Yeah, nice segue. If you can refer to the handouts that we received, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago now, which are the answers to some of our questions. The finance office provided. Contrary to what we had thought before, there is actually only one mandated not-for-profit entity, and that's the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, which is next, funny enough. All the other ones are not mandated. And thank you for highlighting that. I appreciate that, because we were under the impression for many years that there were a couple more mandated, so.
Mr. Stone, are we all set? Thank you. So, with that, page 106 and 107, the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council. Questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, we'll go to page 109 and 110, the Audubon Society. Anyone? Please, Mr. DeWitt.
If I may, the only reason I bring this up, this was a little complicated for me to get through on our committee, right? People see Audubon Society and they think about this countrywide organization. The money that we supply to the Audubon Society is money that stays in Fairfield, Connecticut. This is not this doesn't go to, the regional office in Washington, D.C. and be distributed. This is Fairfield, Connecticut Audubon Society. So I think that's important to note.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. We'll move on to page 111 through 113, which is the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority. Now, we're sure through the finance office, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Gardner, this is not mandated, because this is one of those that in the past, I believe we were informed that they were mandated. Not mandated. Okay. Do we have any questions, comments on the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority? Do you? Please, Mr. DeWitt.
Why we feel the need to give to the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority if we don't have to.
Do we have a representative here? Welcome, sir. The elevator pitch, here it comes.
Yeah.
My name's Doug Holcomb. I'm the general manager of Bridgeport Transit, and I've been before this group to talk about
Yes.
the services that we provide. And sure, and
welcome back.
thanks. And I have our finance director with me too, if the questions get too complicated. But we provide a lot of service, and I've prepared some information for tonight that's specific to what comes to Fairfield, because I know the questions have come up in the past about, well, how much do Fairfield residents benefit? The board's correct to be interested in that. But it's also part of a bigger regional structure, and what I intend to share with you is what parts of what we do benefit Fairfield and how, to what extent they benefit commerce and education and healthcare and some of the other broad issues I think that are important to the community. But we provide fixed route city bus service in Fairfield. We provide ADA service for people with disabilities in Fairfield. And we manage currently the municipal grant formula program that comes from the DOT to the town. Under the formula program, it's transportation for seniors, and we do about 3,000 door-to-door trips. Some are groups and some are individuals every year. Under the ADA program, we have hundreds of eligible riders. These are riders who, because of their disability, can't make it to any of the city bus services. And that benefits a lot of Fairfield residents. And then we have 3 major services on the fixed route lines that benefit Bridgeport, mostly the business areas. But we have a Coastal Link service that runs right through town, which you probably see regularly. We've got service, that's our Coastal Link. We've got service that serves the new train station from downtown Bridgeport and then on to Carleton Hospital, where we bring a lot of people who work there. And then we do service on Black Rock Turnpike. And the Coastal Link, so we have new equipment on the buses now that allows us to track where people are boarding and alighting. And on the Coastal Link alone, in a month, you're having 8,000 people that either board or alight on the post road in those businesses. There are people working there, there are people shopping there, there are people getting health care there. That number also holds for the Route 10 and the Black Rock Turnpike area, all of those businesses up there. A lot of people drawing employees that come there from using our service. And the Route 7 is much smaller. It's peak period service, but that is in the area of 2,000 boardings and alightings. Now, those routes carry a lot more people than that, bring Fairfield residents all through the region as far as Derby and Milford and Norwalk. But those are the boardings and alightings just at stops that are in Fairfield. So, you know, we do, in addition to the services that we do a lot of advocacy. You know, and the town's contribution helps us keep the services in place, but we also advocate for growth in the fixed route services and for maintenance of the municipal grant program, which is regularly at the beginning of a legislative session on the chopping block as well. We get most of our funding from the Department of Transportation. Municipal contributions make up less than 1%, but it's important. It's very important, and without it, we're at a place where we'll be trimming services again. And just a little bit, I know there's questions about how the budget has been. We have been able to get increases, as other transit agencies across the state have, from the DOT. The bulk of our money comes from the Department of transportation line item. We've had increases in that help us keep up with labor costs, healthcare costs, and fuel costs, which are hard to predict. We buy 750,000 gallons a year. We do get money. We have in the past gotten money from the Department of Social Services in the governor's current budget. That line item for us has been eliminated, and that's about a $160,000 hit. That money is earmarked specifically for the Coastal Link. So that would be an additional problem for us. So we've tried to keep it, we work to keep it a very efficient service. We've reduced the number of administrative staff people we've had. We reduced the administrative salaries, and we really have tightened things up over the last couple of years. So it may not sound like a lot, and it may not be required, but it's definitely benefiting Fairfield residents. It's benefiting the region as a whole, and we would have trouble without these contributions.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening. Thanks for being here. 2 questions, one for you and I think one for Mr. Tetro. For you, sir, how much of your budget is made up from fares that you get from people who ride the bus?
Right. We call that the fare box recovery, and it's approaching 40%. Now, business owners might think that's kind of an unusual number, but that is one of the highest, if not the highest, in the state. It's very high fare box recovery. It's a very busy service. And I didn't mention before, we've seen extraordinary growth, probably 16, with the exception of 1 month where we were shut down because of a blizzard. We had 16 consecutive months of ridership growth, and in 2012 had 5.7 million boardings. So more and more people are turning to these services, and there's some small growth in entry-level job positions, and these are the folks that are joining the bus routes.
Thank you. For Mr. Tetro, I noticed in the write-up and from what this gentleman said here that there is, as part of their service, special transportation services for seniors in Fairfield, providing access to critical community services, et cetera. The town also runs a senior bus that would appear to be a duplicative service. Can you explain what's different about what GBT does versus what the town is doing? Obviously, no one in the towns is free, essentially.
Yeah, they're complementary rather than redundant, but let me ask if you
Sure.
could step us through how you fit and how that fits in, because I think you provide that
We
fill the
do.
hole a lot in terms of the transportation provided.
Right.
Thank
We,
you.
we work with Claire at the Senior Center on this. In fact, the money that the town spends on the service at the Senior Center is what's required to leverage the formula money. It's a 50-50 match.
Okay.
And when the municipal grant program was introduced in 2006, there was a maintenance of effort clause in that act, in that public act. So that the state wouldn't be coming across with new money and the towns would in turn take that back. So the partnership that we have is Claire has the services and group trips, and I think mostly in-town trips that she does. The services that we do are group trips, but also regional. So there's a lot of people like to go Christmas tree shop and to the, all over the region. So that's what we're doing. And it's also very efficient for the town because we're doing ADA trips, Bridgeport, the municipal grant for Bridgeport comes through us, same with Trumbull, so these buses are always out on the road, and we're sharing rides, and they're more efficient that way.
Thank you for that.
Mr. DeWitt, and then Mr. Tetra.
Thank you. I have a lot of great information from, you provide a lot of good information to us, but I think it would behoove the board to hear a couple things that I've got written down here. The communities you've named, Bridgeport, Derby, and how much money are they contributing to you annually?
There are 4 member municipalities, Fairfield 30,000, Bridgeport 35,000, Trumbull is 42,000, and Stratford is 18,000. Most of them have been either level or declining, with the exception of Trumbull, which I think bumped in 2007. So it's been a traditional contribution in the sense that it has been unchanged largely over that period of time.
And I believe, and I'll ask the fiscal officer, I think that's what ours is based on, as well as just a historical number. It's not, there's no formula,
No,
in
there's
other words, right?
no
Yeah.
formula or population or anything like that,
Right.
that I know of.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Tetra?
Yes, I just want, if I remember correctly, were you involved in helping our Parks and Rec Commission with some summer camp transportation this past summer?
We do a lot of that, and I can't recall exactly
What I'm referencing is that in our budget adjustments going into last year, Parks and Rec, in running some of their summer program for the disabled kids, had to make some adjustments on the bus transportation because the bus estimates or costs from our regular bus company went up considerably, so they cut back on those.
That left
Again,
some of the students
they
out.
They used the services of this agency to help replace some of the folks that didn't have any other options. Some of the parents could take their kids.
Yep.
In this case, some couldn't, so this filled another niche in that.
Thank you. Mr. Brockville?
One quick question, thanks. You just named 4 towns that contribute, what was it,
Bridgeport, Stratford, Trumbull, and Fairfield.
Are those the only 4 towns that the buses travel through or pick people up?
No, the service is established under a state statute with the 4 member municipalities, and the board of directors, the board of commissioners that oversees that, is made up of 4 appointees from Bridgeport and 2 from each of the other towns. But over the years, we've extended service into all the way up into Derby.
That's what I thought I heard you say. So
Yes.
why
So we-
aren't, have you asked those other towns to contribute like we do?
We have not. We have not asked them to change the level of service into those places is not like what happens in the region, morning express routes and things like that, largely to benefit the Bridgeport area's labor pool and accessing jobs. A lot of it is funded through federal jobs access money, which was designed to be used in reverse commutes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank
you
you
coming
for the
before
time.
us. All right, let's go to page 114 through 116, which is the Fairfield Museum. Questions, comments from board members on this budget? Mr. Jaley is in the room, so if anybody has any questions. Seeing none, I think we're good. Thank you, Mr. Jaley. We're going to go to page 117, the Fairfield's Veterans Advisory and Information Services. It's 117 and 118. Thank you for coming this evening. Any questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Seeing none, thank you. Okay, we'll go to 119 and 120, Southwestern Connecticut EMS Council. Questions, comments on this item? Okay, thank you. We'll go to pages 120 and 121, Southwestern Regional Mental Health Board. Questions, comments on this item? Anyone? Mr. DeWitt.
So this is another one of our formerly mandated, now not mandated. So my question is to, I guess to the financial officer, how do we come up with a $9,476 number, other than it's historical, which doesn't make much sense either?
Then I have no answer.
Okay, so we just carried forward the historical number, and
Do you give us a
Mrs.
number?
Gardner, do you know what the basis is? Hello.
Hi.
Well, I would prefer to let the board answer, but this has been the request they have been submitting over time.
So it was the requested
Yes.
amount. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Kim O'Reilly. I'm the director of the Southwest Regional Mental Health Board. We do have a formula. We ask about 16 cents per capita to the towns in our region. We are a state-mandated organization, and it is the mandate is to have an appointee to our organization, which Mr. Tetro has made a recent appointment. We also are funded in large part in the statutes, which are very loose, but we're funded by a state grant with the intent that we get local revenue. So that's how the statutes read. It's and that is the interpretation of all the boards, how we're funded in the state.
And the amount of the request is the amount per capita. It's a calculation that you
Yes.
provide to the
Yeah.
town. Okay. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate
you.
your commentary. We're going to go to the Southwestern Regional Communications Center. That's pages 123 through 124. I think this has been zeroed out at this point. Mr. Tetro, do you want to walk us through what was going on there? Wasn't that a transfer to?
We transferred it over to, Mr. Mayor, if you could step through this. I believe we transferred over to ECC.
Yeah, that was covered under the,
Yeah, I just want to confirm that. That's right. Right. So we'll no longer see this in the budget book going forward?
right.
Okay.
One less line item.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to
Chairman?
go, yes.
When we covered this under the ECC budget, the chief financial officer said this was the only, I asked, why did we move it? And she said it was the only mandated not-for-profit entity. That's why we moved it. The Greater Bridgeport Regional Council is also mandated, yes?
At that evening, you asked me why, and basically there were two reasons why it was moved. One, it was the only one that had a natural place to go, where it's utilized by the fire and police. And two, at that date, I thought it was the only mandated one. On that date, you thought there were 4 others that were mandated. We investigated those 4 others, and it turned out that of those 4, one of them was. That is the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council.
Okay. Great. Any other questions, comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to the Council of Churches Janus Center. It's pages 125 and 126. Anything from board members on this one? All right. Thank you. 127 and 128, Grassmere by the Sea. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, we'll go to the Sullivan McKinney Elder Housing, which is 129 and 130. Questions, comments on this one? Okay. We'll go to pages 131 and 132, the Kennedy Center. Questions, comments on this one? By this point, you're all thinking that they all go like this. This is not what we do all night, typically. All right. Anyone? Nothing. Pages 133 and 134 will go to the Mill River Wetland Committee. And that actually goes on to pages 135. Any questions, comments on this one? All right. And pages 135 through 137, the Pilot House, and this is our last one. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we have one more. Yeah.
One more.
Any questions, comments for the Pilot House?
Just one comment.
Please.
Mrs. Caruso, who is in charge of the Pilot House, has been extremely helpful in our not-for-profit committee. I think she's been at every meeting, and she's offered a lot of insight into the process, the forms, all that. So I really appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thank you very much for your time. We know a lot of this is volunteer work, and it's, yeah, I know. And it's time-consuming, and we thank you for it, as well as all the other not-for-profits as well. And pages 138 and 139 is the Center for Women and Families. Any questions, comments for the Center for Women and Families? Mr. Brockfeld.
Thanks. No, not on the Senate for Women's and Family. I just wanted to make one comment that I think I can make on behalf of Mr. DeWitt and Mr. McCarthy-Vahey, who's not here tonight. One is to say, first of all, I really appreciate Chris's efforts as a member of the committee. He did an outstanding job as the chairman. And also, I think that we'll probably be coming back to you in the coming year with some more. I mean, what appears to you here is simply a replication of last year's budget and numbers, and don't think that we weren't making progress. Sandy and a lot of things got in the way, and I think, Mr. DeWitt, we probably will get rolling again after this season's over and come back to you with a more comprehensive plan if there is one.
I'm already talking to Mr. Tetro's assistant to schedule me in the day after we sign our budget.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for all the hard efforts for everybody on the committee. At this point, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question, without getting ahead of ourselves or without being presumptuous, would it be safe to assume that on any budget we just went through that there were not questions or comments that the intent of this board is to not reduce those amounts before us?
Does anyone, Mr. Walsh?
I can't say that that's my intent. I mean, I'm looking at the entire budget. I mean, I'm not going to have a 6.4% tax increase personally. So I can't, I'm looking at everything and all the services that the town supplies and how that's going to be affected. So I don't know really where my cuts are going to be, but there are going to be cuts. And, you know, I kind of look at this as a family situation. If I have a family and my income's gone down and I still have expenses, I have to find a way to cut those expenses. If I cut money for my child, in this case, I have 10,000 children I'm looking after in the school kids of this community. How am I supposed to still have my charitable giving be the exact same? So that's kind of what I'm looking at, so I can't make that commitment right now.
Good. I certainly, thank you. I certainly can understand your position, and that's fine. I was asking the question of the board in general.
Does anybody else have a comment on that? Yeah, Mr. Stone, then I'll go to Mrs. Alvin.
I sort of echo what Mr. Walsh says. I think we're just not ready to make commitments yet. We want to hear everything.
Mrs. Alvin?
I could just simply say ditto.
Good. Mr. Bolito?
Since you're asking the whole board, I've moved to cut these items for the last 3 years running, not for any reasons of merit, just because philosophically I differ in terms of taxpayer subsidies for these items, and also because, you know, it's a matter of affordability. So the reason why I didn't ask questions is because the write-ups are excellent. We've heard the synopsis before of what these organizations do. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Kiley, actually. My intent is also to consider any cuts. But I will say one thing. What we've come to the conclusion on this not-for-profit committee is that if these entities bring benefit to the town, then they should remain. So if I can pay a not-for-profit entity $5,000, and the health department it would cost the health department $15,000, I would be in favor of it just staying there. I'm going to use that same philosophy going forward with any of these entities. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Okay, at this time, we took these as pretty much one department. I want to open this up for public comment and allow, and again, it's public comment, not questions, so if anyone would like to come forward and briefly address us, please, I just ask you state your name, your address, and the floor is yours. It's open for anyone. Please. Please, you need to come up to a microphone and so we can all hear you.
We don't bite, don't worry.
I'm Louise Shipkin, and I lived in Fairfield for 41 years, and I'm going to the Fairfield Senior Center, and they're telling me that they can't afford to live here anymore. It's 6-7% tax increase this year again, and I'm looking at what you guys are supposed to be doing. And I took offense hearing Pequot is a private entity, not part of our library system. There's more concentrated wealth in Southport than there is anywhere else. And I don't see why I should be supporting a library that has about 10 places to sit. They used to even have a basement where you could go downstairs and sit in a corral, and you could actually, that's all filled with their books for their book fair. You go upstairs and you have the center room that's just been completely done over, and it has only about 15 seats. And they told you what their circulation is. I don't see how we can be supporting that any further. I really don't. I mean, I'd rather see you take that money and keep the main library open at night.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Could you give your address to our secretary so that we do have that down? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Rita Papazian. I live on Rowland Road. Like Louise, my family moved here in 1971. I agree. We love our Fairfield Public Library. We do love Pequot, but not at the but we don't love Pequot at the expense of our Fairfield Public Library. I brought my children there. I bring my grandchildren there. I was a reporter covering the library board in 1973. I conducted memoir workshops there, and currently I host a monthly Writers Read program where writers come and read their work. I just invite you to go to the Fairfield Library at 5 minutes to 1 on a Saturday and be among the people who have to wait till 1 o'clock for the library to open. And I just can't believe, I just say that Fairfield deserves more than this. We deserve better. It is so confusing to look at the bookmark with the hours for Fairfield Branch Library and the Fairfield Main Library and say, wait a minute, what day is it? What time is it? Where do I go? I've been to the Fairfield Branch Library, and then 1 o'clock I have to pack up and go down to the Fairfield Main Library. I've been engrossed in work at 5 o'clock, and it announces, sorry, we're closing. I have to see whether it's Monday, is it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to know whether I can stay after 5 o'clock. You have to really consider this. You have to compare the facilities, the numbers, the figures, the facility, the computers, the books, the magazines, the chairs. This is a really serious problem in this town, and it's an embarrassment. I went online before I came here this evening and looked at the hours of the Westport Library. I can't believe the difference in the hours. You may say, well, this is the library director's decision. Yes, she has to weigh it. She has the dollars, and she has to decide how she's going to use them. But we cannot have the dollars at a level where it affects the hours. It cannot. This is a community center This is the basis of our education and our information and our community, no matter how old our citizens are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Feel free.
Hi, my name is Susan Schnitzer. I'm a resident of Fairfield. I'm also one of the directors at a nonprofit you were speaking of tonight, where I have been with a nonprofit for 7 years. My history was in finance before that, so I appreciate the job that you're all doing, but really want to focus on something that somebody said, that you want to make sure when you're putting money towards these nonprofits that you're getting basically more of a bang for your buck. Really look at these budgets, because I can tell you from where I sit, I can speak from my agency, and we partner with many of the other agencies you fund here. You're getting a huge bang for your buck. The services, most of them aren't duplicative. Most of them aren't something that's currently being offered in the town, which is why we're here. And for the most part, what we're asking for is a very, very small amount of what it actually costs these agencies to come and provide these services to your town. We get funding from multiple other sources, and this is one of the towns that we come to and one of the sources. And that being said, then I know we all really do appreciate what you do give us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for addressing us. Mrs. Stambler.
Thank you. Ann Stamler, 411 Stratfield Road, also a member of the representative town meeting, and I realize I will have an opportunity to address this budget, the town budget, more in depth at a later date as part of that body. But I did want to, in particular, thank Mr. DeWitt for bringing forward what was sustained by the speaker immediately before me, which is that these agencies provide to the town, many of them, services which the town could not purchase at the cost of our contribution to these agencies. Each is different, each merits being weighed differently. But that is a fact that we should consider at a time when our budget is, as has been said, growing at an unsustainable rate. So I just wanted to thank him for that comment and support that concept.
Thank you, Mrs. Stamler. And good luck with the budget when it comes your way. All right, any other questions, comments, or actually comments from the public? Please, sir.
Question, is there going to be an additional discussion period after the library budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. And that's the only question I'll take. Please, feel free. Good evening.
Good evening, young man.
Go ahead.
My name is Nathaniel.
Hello, Nathaniel.
He's kind of nervous. Hi, I'm Jennifer Yang Kui, and I'm a resident of Fairfield. And he wanted me to bring him to the meeting today and talk about his experience with our libraries. Go ahead.
Well,
how old are you?
I'm 8 years old, and
He's so nervous.
Okay.
What do you like about the libraries? The Maine, the Woods,
well,
Pequot?
I like reading the books and the programs there. And
what do you need to tell them?
I just don't like it when they're cutting all the hours of the library, and
Talk about the programs.
Well,
what kind of programs have you gone to at the library?
well, I've gone to I've gone to science programs and chess clubs, and when I was little I went to pajama story time and
Mad About Daddy. All the holiday activities?
Oh yeah.
Christmas?
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of holiday programs and
What else?
well,
How many books do we check out every week?
a lot.
A lot?
Good for you.
And are we the ones standing there like before library opens on Saturday? What used to be open on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
We'll be waiting around at the door.
But now we can't go to the library on Sunday because it's closed.
How about museum? Talk about the museum and the Discovery.
Oh yeah, because
Zoo.
Yeah, we like being at the Discovery Museum. So we get to see all the exhibits and learn about stuff.
Guggenheim?
In the library, well, they get us museum passes, and so we can go to museums.
And all the parenting classes for parents?
I think that comes from someone else.
What else do you need to say? Can you just say thank you?
Thank
you
you.
for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, young man.
Nathaniel, thank you.
Did great.
Hey, Nathaniel,
Chairman?
speaking in public at your age is tough. You did a great job, and in fact, I would bet you every member of these boards had to do that at one point or another, so you
Speaking
too
at our
could be
age,
up
it
here.
is tough.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that Mr. Stone goes to pajama story time. I think isn't it every Thursday evening? Right, isn't it?
I could
Yeah.
do without that visual.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you say I share too much.
All right, well, thank you. I don't know that anyone wants to follow that, but feel free if you'd like. There you go.
Doreen Caruso. I would like to thank Chris as well as Kenny and the rest of the board for the nonprofit committee. It was a long process. It was a lot of hours. And as a taxpayer in this town and a one-income family, I do understand the cuts that we have to face. But again, I'd like to compliment what every other nonprofit has said, is that look at what the services that you're getting your bang for your buck, because what the services that we provide, you would not be able to do than what we do. So again, I'd like to thank the time that you guys all give and the care that you give to our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time as well, and for all the not-for-profit time. There's a lot that goes in. It makes the town a very special place. Any other comments from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll close the miscellaneous or not-for-profit part of our program for this evening, and we're going to head into the library, which is section number 7010 in our budget. And page 239, is that what I heard? Thank you. Page 239 is the write-up. Page 240 through 243. 244 are the numbers. Good evening. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Nice to see you again. Okay.
Yeah. Karen Ronald, Town Librarian.
Kristen Tierney, Chair of the Library Board of Trustees.
Great. And I just want to make sure the board members did receive a distribution electronically earlier today from the library on some supporting documents regarding some initiatives and some of the public support for the library. So we recognize that, and that has been distributed, so thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions, comments from board members? Mr. Tetro?
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify, in terms of, there have been a number of comments about the budget adjustments this year that reduce library hours and reduce material. And could you just comment on whether those hours have been restored and the material purchase have been restored in the budget that's before us?
Yes, it has been. We were asked to cut $108,000 and keep it in reserve for the contingency last year after the Board of Finance passed their budget, and we have done so. So this year, we had a cut of 72, I made the cut of $72,000 for hours, which you're hearing about, and $36,000 for library materials. Happily, the First Selectman has put those funds back into this budget that we're presenting to you tonight.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Brockville?
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for coming. And we do have a great library, by the way, both of them, all of them. Could you tell me, though, it's a bit of a sore spot for me. We talked about it last year. I don't think I was the only
I
one.
know
who
what you're gonna
raised it.
ask.
Yeah. But could you tell me specifically how you've increased the usage of the electronic checkout devices?
You mean the digital library?
No. Well, when you're walking out the door in the
Oh,
corner
the
there, you can check
RFID?
out. Yeah, you could check out the books by
Right.
yourself. We talked last year
Right.
about some disappointment that we had
Mhm.
spent a fair amount of money for those and
Mhm.
didn't, you said in fact they weren't getting much use, and we asked you, you said you might have some ideas about how to increase their use?
I think you saw a document that we sent to you today, but I'll go over what we've done so far. There are 2 RFID stations, which are self-checkout machines in the main library, sort of attached to the circ desk, sort of perpendicular. There are also other things that RFID involves, so there's a lot of machinery and, attached to that, and I actually listed in your document. Well, the first thing we did is we took one of those machines and we put them in the children's library because we know that children are very attracted to new technologies and they pick it up very quickly. So we've had some luck that way. It's not right at their front, at their front desk upstairs, but it is getting use. The problem with the RFID right now is it doesn't allow for full functionality of anything you do at a normal sort of checkout desk. So if you don't have your library card, you can't use the RFID station. If you have a hold, you can't get the hold automatically from the air. That involves, human intervention. If you want to pay a fine, these machines do not allow you to pay a fine. They were sort of first-generation RFID, workstations back 7 years ago. So we've done the very best with what we can. We are directing people there. We've had staff, ask people to use them, but really, if you don't have a straight in and out transaction, you still have to use the human element. These machines do not check in all the materials either, they just check them out. So I think we're using them really at our full functionality unless we upgraded the system so we could do all these other things that we normally would do at a desk.
Are you, I think the idea about putting them up in the children's library is an excellent idea. The kids, obviously, are the quickest to adapt to new technology
Yeah.
and, in fact, can make a game out of it. Are you finding that it's being used up there to the extent that it could allow you to adjust staffing?
No, it's not that kind of thing, because again, what I've just said is that they still, if they don't have their library card, if they want to pay a fine, if they have a hold on a book, no, it just doesn't work more than just a simple check in and check out. So we've done what we can, we place them up there, we encourage people to use them, but it really isn't going to go much further than about 15% of our total circulation. It just doesn't have the functionality.
And one other question, which is a bit personal in nature, but it's I'll ask
Uh-oh.
it anyway. No, it's no big. It's just a
It's not
question.
about pajama time, is it?
No,
Pajama time?
No.
Ah.
Although,
You can wear your footy.
although if they read No David, I'll be there. If anybody remembers that book. The VHS movies.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if 1% of the population still has a VHS player or doesn't have a DVD player. I can't believe it. And yet we take up a lot of our shelf space. That's the question I'm asking. And they're big things, and you go in there to look for a movie, and like 3/4 of the actual physical space in the movies area are DVDs. I'm just guessing, but it really feels that way at least. Why are we maintaining, and I assume it costs something to maintain, even if we're not buying new ones, it costs something to maintain them, to check them in, check them out, whatever it is, the little boxes we use. Why would we not, I'm a big believer we have to move forward with technology, and I'm just curious why we have so much of this VHS sitting on the shelves.
There are a few reasons, one of them being we still have people in Fairfield, residents who don't have DVD machines, and we have been talking about getting rid of VHS, and people are being very concerned about that. So in fact, we did get rid of them at the branch library, so we're sort of halfway there, but libraries really are bridges in communities as far as, technology goes. We don't necessarily throw everything out and start with a new technology. We really sort of bridge it for a while until everyone has a DVD player. The other thing is some material is not available on DVD. So some of the older informational stuff, some of the documentaries, we cannot get on DVD. So we still want the content, so it's in this format for now. I'd love to see them go.
Okay, no, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Bolito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Hi.
I know you guys took a hit last year because you were asked to reduce your budget and it affected hours. The question I have is, can you point to which specific line items in the budget relate to that?
Yeah, it was part-time payroll. So it was 51030 for 72,000. Also, it was library materials, which is 56180. So it was 2 lines that were hit.
Thank you.
Okay, a comment and a clarification. Or a clarification and then a question. Related to the reduction you had spoken of earlier of $108,000, that was done after the budget process. That was done after, that didn't emanate from this board. That
That's
was
what
done
I did
afterwards.
say that.
I understand that. No, that wasn't really the point. I wanted to make sure that Mr. Bolito's comment was after the budget reduction. I wanted to make sure that wasn't the same budget reduction that was separate after it left this body. The question was, how was it determined, and I'm just curious, how was it determined how that number would be made up? In other words, everyone has to prioritize, right? So the priority was, okay, we're going to be cutting this, and we're going to be cutting that, as opposed to doing something else. How was that? Can you walk us through that process? Because obviously, the reduction created a firestorm of some level within town regarding, we heard the comments earlier about the hours and things like that. So how was it determined where those cuts were implemented?
I'd have to say, if you look at our budget, we've had a lean budget for a long time. There really isn't any extra meat in our budget. We're still down full-time positions. We really have, if you look at our line items, I've reduced some line items when I can, so I don't have a lot of meat to cut. When $108,000 is asked of me out of $1 million that I actually control, I don't have many options. So I decided I could have gone $108,000 with all the hours, and that would have affected our community more. But I wanted to try and split it a bit between library materials and hours.
Let me follow up on a comment you just made. You just indicated that you control $1 million of the budget.
Right. I don't control the salaries. I don't control all the related compensation with that.
So you don't control the head count?
Not really. It's a union agreement.
So there's a minimum manpower in this contract? I'm just want to be clear as to...
No, there's not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, so there's no mandate for certain hours, certain positions, certain that...
Correct.
...within the budget that controls it. So in reality, and I'm just laying that out there because I'm trying to understand the prioritization, there's a larger percentage of this budget other than $1 million that are within the town's control. I don't want to say that it's a unilateral decision or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, and what I was trying to get to is there was a priority list that was made, and as the town librarian, I guess, in concert with the library board and with the first selectman at that point, the decision was made that this reduction was asked for subsequent to the budget process, and it was these services that were deemed, for lack of a better way to put it, and forgive me, it's like rating your children, but it's these were considered the lowest priorities, the easiest to cut.
No, they're not the easiest to cut. As public servants, we would love to have the library open again, and we know our patrons would.
I understand,
I
but
just
there's
don't
a
have a lot of
prioritization.
meat in my budget to cut $108,000. I really don't. I still am down two full-time positions, too. So I really don't have a lot of meat. I can't find 108 except in those two lines. So I made some very difficult decisions, and I think we've done a really good job trying to accommodate our patrons in this really hard economic,
Okay, where were the
situation.
when were the two positions cut and how
They're
were they
not cut, they're there, but I haven't filled them.
Where are they?
Where are they in here?
They're a reference library, a children's librarian and a TH6, so a reference associate.
Forgive me, so tell
say
them
that
where
again.
they are.
They're all sort of grouped.
So they're budgeted for.
They're budgeted.
Okay, so what are those numbers? If you can give me those numbers.
I don't really know what the starting salary is right now, but we were asked not to fill one, which is a reference librarian, but there are a couple there.
Okay, but they're in this budget, right?
Yes, they are.
So they're funded.
They are funded, but we have not filled them.
Okay, but that's not part of the 108,000.
No, that is not.
So that's in addition to the 108,000. There's two positions that haven't been filled.
Yes.
Yet they've been budgeted.
Yeah.
Okay, so
What was the second position? Was reference librarian?
It's a reference associate, which isn't a professional librarian position, but they work on the desk in the reference.
Can you please look at your budget
I am
book and
looking.
tell us which number they are and what page it's on?
Okay, try 242 and 243.
Yes, what positions?
Okay, so I'm looking here. One would be a reference librarian, which is the top of 243.
No, 82,995, right?
And then, I don't know what they even call them. I call it a reference associate, so a library associate. So that's on, there are several of them. It's on 242.
got it. So that's 292. Let's call it on just salary. Okay, so these are just salaries that are listed. So there's 5 library associates for $292,000. So therefore, if I do the math, that's what, $60,000 in just salary. that's 114 or 115,000 in a reference librarian. That comes to $180,000. That's for two. I'm sorry. Thank you for doing that. So that's 70, right? So that's 130,000 plus benefits at 25%, right? So if we do 25 on that, 23,000. Okay, do that. That's close to $160,000 on top of the 108. So the question I have, those were not cut from the budget.
No, they weren't.
Okay, so what happened with the money, and where are those positions?
Mr. Tetro asked me to leave one open, and the other one hasn't been filled yet.
Okay, so that's $60,000 or $70,000 that's available for funding that hasn't been used. So theoretically, we could have restored library hours up to $70,000. I'm just asking the question. That's not a catch, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm trying to understand it because I did not know that those two positions were not filled. Nor would I necessarily know, but that's $150,000 on top of a cut of $108,000. So that's really a $260,000 that's not in here, though. Yeah. We're talking a lot about the 108, but not about the 160.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe one of those would be described as temporarily open. Somebody left, there's like a domino effect as it goes through and gets filled. So that one hasn't been open for the year.
Let me think about it, because it is a bit of a domino effect. As people were promoted, there were positions that became open, and that's what's happened in this case.
But that's kind of normal. I mean,
Right.
it'd be nice to know how long they've been open, but that's kind of normal churn versus I've been asked to leave the position open.
Right.
And therefore, my budget's been cut.
Well, I was
So
asked
one
to
of
leave-
those would be, in your terminology, normal churn.
I don't think so.
Okay, so I want to make sure, because you gave me the impression that both of those positions you were asked not to fill.
No, I'm telling you that I was asked not to fill one, and I haven't filled another.
Got it. Okay, so
Right.
there was one position
Right.
for 60 to 70,000, right, plus benefits. So there's one position for 100,000, give or take, that hasn't been filled, right? And then there's another position that, through normal churn, is open. Right, so it's actually over 200,000, right? The 108 plus that one position would
Yeah.
be 200,000. So theoretically, we could have actually not filled that position and not cut back on library hours, right? I'm just asking. Please.
My understanding, just as a board member, is that that's a different line item. We can't spend money out of the line item. So as a board
That
member...
happens in other departments.
Well, that's not something that we ever, that's never, ever been something that we even thought that could be, if it's an open position. I'm just saying that as from my position. So I'm
No,
not,
no, I-
if that is possible, that's something that I personally did not know was a possibility. But that's not my job to decide where that is. But that wasn't my understanding.
But my concern is, after the town audit, they did say that we actually were in need of 2 more full-time positions on top of these. I mean, we are leanly staffed as it is, so I'm not sure I want to go that way when we were the second busiest library in Connecticut, the busiest branch library, trying to do the very best we can, and then reduce staff even further. So the part-time hours were cut because we depend on our part-time staff for weekends and for evening hours beyond the normal 35-hour week.
Okay, so your position now is you're down 2 staff members that have been recommended but have never been budgeted. And you're down 1 additional
No, they
position.
were budgeted, we just haven't filled them.
No. What you just said is, I was recommended to add 2 positions. That's what you just said.
From the town audit, when we,
Right.
when the town
That-
audit, yeah. So these
you're-
were never added to our...
Right, they
our
were never added to the
right,
budget,
Right,
right? So your position is, okay, I had 2 positions I've never asked for, they've never been filled, I never asked here for.
Right.
They've never been filled.
Right.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm trying to understand it. Then, you have this other position that is in the budget for rough numbers, $100,000, right, that hasn't been filled. And it hasn't been filled since when?
I'm trying to think, because it is a domino effect.
Mr. Chair?
I think from September on.
Okay.
This is a point of information. Through January, you would expect 58% of a fully staffed crew of the wage, 58% of the budget to be expended.
Yeah.
Just as a point of information, through January, the library expenditures is 55.5%. So
So where's all that money if we're down in position, where are we spending the funds?
I'm talking specifically about that line item,
The salary line
the
item.
line item, salary line item.
Right, so question
So
stands.
there's
Where's
being,
the money
it's being spent on salaries, obviously, it's in that line item.
So that would say that there's not a position open.
I don't know the answer, I just thought I would.
Right, no,
I
but
thought
you're
I'd just
reaching
make
this-
your puzzle a little bit more complex, that's all.
Right, exactly. I feel like, who's on first?
Probably the increases.
Mr. DeWitt.
So I'm looking at the budget, and I'm seeing that the regular payroll for the library with the encumbrances is 91.1% spent. That's what this.
Yeah, I mean, looking at encumbrances, Chris, really doesn't help anything. I mean,
Well,
it's because they.
Every other
they-
budget line item, we have a budget, and then we encumber money, and then you get to 100%.
At the end of the year.
At the end of the year. I get it.
Right.
So this is saying, there's a budget, we spent some money, we encumbered the rest, and yet our projection at the end of the year will be 91.1%. Funny that the available budget is about $180,000, which kind of accounts for the 2 people you're short. So,
Right.
are you unable to take that money from payroll line and move it anywhere?
I've never been able to do that, and
Well, you were saying
To my
before you were asked
understanding.
not to for one of the positions, right?
So you were told not to move it?
no, I've never taken a line item like regular payroll and shifted anywhere, any of the other things. I've never done that. I consider these things can't move them around. I've never been able to do that.
But if you know you're 2 people short, I mean, I'm going to ask a process question. Do you, as overall budget owner, are you restricted from moving money out of payroll?
Yes.
So if we're asking the librarian to be 2 people short against a budget that was approved here for 31 people, why can't we move, like every other department, move it to another line item?
Yeah, Mr. DeWitt, in order to move a budget from one line item to another, it takes the vote of this board, the Board of Finance. That's what we
Right.
do. at
I
the
think we would've done
Year
it.
end, After we're done.
After we're done.
Correct.
So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
already be done.
But we didn't even know, well, I'll speak for myself.
Yep.
I didn't know that we were 2 people short on a budget that was approved for 31 people.
And
I thought
again-
there were 31 people.
Just to clarify, we had the discussion with Mr. Flynn earlier, one of those positions has not been open for the year. It's part of the normal churn. I'm going to say somebody left in the library, and there's been 3 moves since then.
Yeah, and one position has been open for a while, and the next one's been open, I don't know, early this year.
So-
And I think
So
that's fair.
that's
one.
part of the normal churn. The other position,
But even if it's one position, one of the positions open is $83,000. How much, how much was what was the number we used as a reduction to base the fact that we are closing the library early? It's not much more than that, right? It's
Well,
like
the number
$100,000.
The number I took and cut the hours was $72,000. I'm uncomfortable cutting more staffing positions.
yeah, Mr. Chair, if I might
We're
finish.
really leanly staffed as it is now.
Go ahead, hang on, Mr.
Okay,
DeWitt.
yeah,
Mr.
Mr.
Tetra.
Mr. DeWitt, cut in a little bit before I'd finish that point, that when you look at this, there are 2 things that happen. One, a year ago, fiscal 12, we had the position open, and I asked Ms. Ronald not to fill it, because I was concerned about where we were going to finish the year. And for most of the year, that was a concern. Going into this year, where not this board, but the RTM made a significant adjustment to contingency. And going into the start of this year, I was concerned about how we would adjust for that and where we would end up. And at the end of the first quarter, Storm Sandy hit, which raised significant issues on what costs we had. So from a standpoint of maintaining our actuals at that current level, I continue to ask Ms. Ronald not to fill that one position.
I thought this was going to be the first budget we were going to hear that didn't have Storm Sandy in it. I guess not.
The Storm Sandy expenses, Mr. DeWitt, hit the town. and we
I
had
get it.
all
I
right,
get it.
So from
But
that point on,
before-
from that point on, Mr. DeWitt, there's significant questions about what the cost impact of that would be.
I understand.
All right,
I guess
so-
what I'm saying is, before we ever heard of Storm Sandy or Storm Nemo or any of the other ones, there was an $83,000 there was an $83,000 appropriated budget for a person. I'll just talk one person, forget a half person. That would have, if allowed to transfer the money, would have kept the library open the regular hours.
Correct.
So the cut wasn't 108,000.
It was 108,000 because I also had to cut, I was asked to keep in reserve 108. 72 came from part-time budget and 36 came from library materials.
And 83 came from another position that was not filled. So it was $200,000. So this budget coming out of the gate, from actual to next year, is increased by, rough number, $200,000 from actual operations this year.
If it's funded, yes.
Right. Well, that's a point, the budget before us. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's clear. I was not aware of some of those things. I didn't understand how the priorities were done. I was not aware of the other position. So, and by the way, I'm not questioning the methodology for getting there. I just didn't understand what that methodology was. So I thank you for that. Mr. Walsh, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. Mr. Tetra, when you realized that there was a surplus last year, because it was reported back in March or April that we were about to have a $3.5 million surplus, and that number miraculously did appear to be the exact number, pretty much, or pretty close to it. Why wouldn't you replace the position at that point in time?
Actually, Mr. Walsh,
Yeah.
the timing was in March 20th last year was the first time we heard the budget went from 500,000 to, or that surplus was projected from 500,000 to 1.5.
Okay.
So up until that point, and the 500,000 was not a highly confident number at that point. So going into that, no, we didn't, because I wasn't sure quite where we'd finish up, and I definitely had concerns over the last quarter of last year as to whether that 500,000 would be enough of a surplus projection.
What did the surplus end up being?
Considerably more than that.
How much?
Don't have the number off the top of my head. I will defer to the chief fiscal officer there.
I believe it was 3,700,000 is my guess.
3 million what?
3,700,000, I believe.
$3,700,000 surplus. Okay.
But Mr. Tetra was correct. It was reported by the then chief financial officer at a Board of Selectmen meeting in March at 500, and then a week later at a Board of Finance meeting at $1,500,000.
With the, and I understand you were concerned with the RTM cutting the contingency. What other positions in town did you tell people not to hire in, so that we can get prepared for some of them that might be in this budget? Was there a whole list of them, or was it just Ms. Ronald's?
At that point, I'd asked for no new positions to be filled.
So how many positions are being held open because of that in town?
To my knowledge right now, I'd have to check to be sure, but
So did you have a process where you said, we're going to put together a bunch of open positions, not going to be hired? You had a certain number so that you could rely on that as surplus?
no.
Or as a contingency?
No, at that point, I was just trying to freeze the actuals where they were, so that we'd have some stability there, and see what the impact of both the cuts to contingency were. Starting early in July, it looked like there might be some additional shortfalls in the budget, and wanted to make sure that we saw how those played out.
Can you give us a list of every position that was held open, and the ones specifically, separately, the ones that you specifically told to hold open in town during the year, and that are still open?
I believe we can put that together.
And the salary levels and benefit levels that go along with that.
Okay. Great. Mr. Brockville?
Thank you. You finished, Mr. Walsh?
Yes. Well, I'll finish with that.
You want
Oh, I'm sorry, you had another question.
Said you
Is
had a
it
few.
reser-
No, please, continue, and then I'll...
Go ahead.
Ms. Ronald, the other position, this normal churn, how long has that position been open? Has it been listed? And how long have people been interviewing for that job and it not be filled?
A new job description has been written by me, and it's over in HR, and probably there's going to be a discussion with the union about changes to the job description, so it's, who knows how long it will be open. I mean, that's their negotiation. I'm going to say January or February, I don't know the dates.
All right, if you can get back to us with that date that it became open?
So, on that point, so this isn't, is this just a replacement, or is this actually, someone left, you're redoing the job and creating a new
Well, someone was promoted within the library system, and then I've been allowed to revamp job descriptions because a lot of them are old, so I do look at what we need now. And it doesn't mean they go up a level or down a level, they're just more 21st century librarian positions.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Mr. Walsh, my apologies.
Should we be expecting then there to be a surplus in your salary account at the end of the year, by the time these people were out of work and you didn't have the positions filled?
I believe that would be a reasonable assumption.
Could you find out what the amount of that amount would be, including the benefit levels, when that's applied to our board?
Okay. Mr. Brockfeld, thank you for being patient.
My pleasure. You know, I want to go back for a second to the
Yeah.
issue of the hours.
Yeah.
Because I have to be honest with you, I understand you have a tough job to do, and I'm sure you'd love the library to be open 24 hours a day and have trampolines in the children's section if you could, but we don't.
Maybe.
So, you know, but when I look at the, you know, I just added up your total salary and benefits budget. I think I got it right, around $3.4 million. I added up the salaries, the part-time payroll, the pay differential, the health insurance, and the Social Security. I think that covers the big ones. And that comes up about $3.4 million. And you said that the closing of the library, the reduction in the library hours, which, you know, many people spoke eloquently about the hardship that it brought to them, including a very cute young man who's since left, probably way past his bedtime. And you said that was about $70,000 of the 108, is that right?
72.
All right, so 70, I called it 70, yeah. $70,000 over 3.4 million is 2%. 2%. And I have to be honest with you, I find it hard to believe that you could not have found 2% of your compensation, because you do have, we've heard from Mr. Tetro, you have total privilege, even if you don't want to reduce staff if necessary, to really, you know, to lay somebody off, or not bring in a temporary person, or whatever it may be. I find it hard to believe that you couldn't have found 2% in your total salary line items rather than impose this kind of hardship on the people of Fairfield. I just can't believe that there's not somebody who was responsible for some nice service, maybe pajama time, for example, something that we could jettison so that the libraries could be open and we wouldn't have this complaints from the people of the town. So I think, I'm going to be very blunt with you, I think there was some intent there that to put some pressure on us and the RTM and so forth. I just want to repeat that. I cannot believe you couldn't find 2% of that budget to cut rather than to impose these kind of hours, which seem to be really upsetting the people of Fairfield.
Well, our full-time people work 35 hours a week, sort of officially, and a lot of us work a lot more hours because we're professionals and we like what we do. I will tell you, our staffing is really lean. If you look at other communities serving 60,000 population, and we always have been lean, and we've been very efficient in our staffing. So to the point of reducing full-time staff, it's just not really that feasible
But
to
I'm going to
do.
interrupt you if you don't mind. But you have $500,000 in your part-time payroll.
Right.
$500,000.
Right.
Again, I'm going to ask you straight out. Are you telling me that if you were forced to, you couldn't do without one person rather than impose this kind of hardship on the entire town?
I made a decision to the best of my professional opinion and experience after talking to my senior managers and trying to figure this out, and we spent hours and hours trying to do this. And I think I made the right decision, a tough one in a really hard time, and I'd love those hours back for our community.
Okay, I think we differ on this one.
Can I, if follow up on that?
Mr. Kiley?
Can I please follow up on that? How is reducing the library hours the right decision?
When I am asked to cut that kind of dollars, when I really do only have controllable of $1 million, I did not know I could do anything with full-time. This is sort of my first experience thinking I might have been able to do this. I had no idea. My understanding was my only thing I really could cut was library materials or part-time payroll, and that's what I did. So that's a decision I made.
Okay, so back to Mr. Brockfeld's comments, which I agree with completely. Without going back through them again, I have to keep asking myself why we couldn't go across the entire budget, whether it was personnel or elsewhere, across the full $4.4 million, find $70K somewhere, somehow, even if it was a delayed hiring or something creative, without reducing hours, without putting the town through the hardship, and without causing so much angst for many, many citizens of our town.
I look at my line items now, and the only line items that are large enough to sustain even close to 108 are library materials, any compensation, and one line fees and professional services, which handles all my software in the library. There really isn't a lot. I don't have a large pool of money from which to cut.
It's an unacceptable answer. I disagree with it, but thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
At what level does the administration get involved in looking at this and deciding about this service for the town? Because Ms. Ronald made a decision. Was the administration happy with that decision to cut back the hours for this amount of money? Or did you sit down with them and try to potentially hold the library open to hours by trying to hold back a position, kind of like you did with the contingency?
Mr. Walsh, I wasn't happy with any of the cuts we made coming out of last year, but we did them in response to, initially, they were identified as part of the, if you will, possible adjustments when the RTM requested from each department head, if your budget was cut 2%, what would you adjust? So that was the initial identification. The second piece is when they cut about half that much, so roughly 1% of the budget. We went through that list and identified what potentially we could cut within that. None of those were items that we would have ideally liked to cut.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. I have Mrs. Albans waiting, and then Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
On the question that Mr. Walsh just asked, I think that is an interesting question, because I would also question what role the Library Board of Trustees would be playing in such decisions as to how the budget is dealt with and with regard to such a reduction. I don't need an answer to that. I'm just somewhat rhetorical. And I think it's pretty clear what this board feels about the loss of library hours, given that there was flexibility in this budget to provide for them. And I think we're all bright people in this room tonight, and I think that everyone should know that we'd like to see the library hours restored. And I don't think we have to continue to discuss this all night long. I think as this budget moves forward and they have their appropriation next year, I think that's what everyone here would like to see. Whether it's from not filling a position or it's looking at accounts and finding out where you can scrape the money together, but it's pretty clear that we all want the library hours restored.
Thank you, Mrs. Albin. I'm going to go, Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey, I think Mr. Bolito had a follow-up comment, and then I'll go right to you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy-Vahey. It seems to me that at the heart of the confusion here and at the heart of what we're talking about is that, Mrs. Ronald, you did not know that you could take money from the payroll line item and put it toward another item. My question for you, Mr. Tetro, in the course of your discussions when you were making these cuts after, the contingency fund got cut, did you let Mrs. Ronald know that you can do this? Because obviously we do it in other departments, and understanding you have to come back before us, but was that something that was discussed in your meetings with the town librarian?
It was not. At the time, I didn't realize that she wasn't aware of that, but also, to be fair, shortly after those cuts to balance out the RTM cut, or the adjustments to balance out the RTM cut, I was concerned about where we'd started fiscal year 13, and as we progressed through it, there were additional concerns that got raised. So I would not have, at that point, suggested necessarily filling that position.
So in essence, you agreed with the decision the town librarian made, given the totality of where the budget was?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey. Thank you, Mr. Frischler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello, good evening. I apologize for my tardiness. My question is, if you can help us understand what all is included in part-time payroll? Is it literally the people who are working in the library, or are there any other folks who come in and do, in other words, the people who work at the desk, the people
Yeah.
who work in reference, or does it also include those who come in for programming,
No, this is
events?
part-time hours, public service desks. We have about 80 part-time people to be open over 100 hours a week in both buildings. Remember, we have 2 buildings, and we have teen, children's, reference, and circ in both buildings. We're serving 8 service desks with over 50 hours a week in both buildings. So it's just part-time hours. It's nothing like programs or anything like that. Shelvers.
Okay, thank you. I also, I agree about restoring our library hours, but I recognize the struggle here. I think there's a shared opinion at the table that the library, we'd like to see the library open as much as possible. It sounds like you were allowed, and as a department head, to make the decision that you saw best, given the restraints that you saw. I'm also hearing that you're concerned about the full-time staffing, and that you're, correct me if I'm wrong, not really willing to go any lower with those
I'm
full-time
always
staff
willing
other
to
than what
consider
you've
ideas.
asked.
I'm always willing to consider ideas. I'm not rigid. I just have to tell you from a professional point of view, after running libraries for 20 years, we are really leanly staffed. We don't have a full complement in the children's area nor the reference. So it does have an effect. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just telling you, as a professional, I have to voice my concern about that.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you, thank you.
Mrs. Tierney, you wanted to say something?
Thank you very much. There's been several comments about, was this done for effect? Was this done to get the board's attention, the town's attention, the taxpayers? That is absolutely not the case. As a matter of fact, this was something that was, we as a board felt that we had to really support Karen in this. She wanted to make sure that that the branch wasn't affected more than Maine, no one demographic was hurt more than any other. We have every demographic in town. We serve everybody. We have people who work in the library, we have teens, preschoolers, seniors who come in for their coffee, people who work there, entrepreneurs, moms. She did a phenomenal job trying to balance this so that no one demographic was hurt more than any other. And we didn't know, and I know, because I work very closely with Karen, that she didn't know that this was an option to move something from a line item to another. If that had ever been on the table, we would never have done this. I don't even think that that's a question, but this wasn't done for effect. That same comment came up about summer reading. The program was tremendously successful. It had been under review for years, and there was a backlash, oh, are you doing this because you're trying to get the attention? No, and it turned out to be one of the most successful programs we've ever had. She's a professional. She has done a phenomenal job balancing this. Had we known that this was something that could have been done through line items, certainly we would have. And I would really like the answer to that, because frankly, we want these hours restored. So if that's an option, that's something that's going to need to be looked at.
Do you want me to respond, or do you want to have a question? Thank you,
I
Mrs.
had a
Tierney.
question for, and thank you very much, Ms. Tierney, for showing up tonight. But as the Library Board of Trustees, what are your priorities? Because I'm just saying, as an individual taxpayer in town, my priorities on regards to the service of the library is, one, the doors have to be open. Clearly. But you guys made a decision to close the doors for a period of time. Regardless of all the other services you supply, the number one service you supply is people coming to get books or to use your reference materials or whatever. So everything after that, to me, is secondary. But yet the decision for $72,000 in a $4.4 million budget, as Mr. Brockfeld said earlier, was to close the doors at both branches for different hours and whatever. And I don't know what your priorities are when you were helping Ms. Ronald trying to set the priorities, but to me, the doors have to be open for anybody to be able to use the building.
We don't help her set the priorities. That's not our role at all. But we did also look at this budget cut as 10%, approximately 10% of the controllable budget. That's how we looked at it. I know that you don't see it that way, and I understand that. I do understand that, but that's how we looked at it. So I do understand that that's not how you do, and maybe that's something that we'll look at in a different way, but that was not how we looked at this. And there really isn't fat. We go through this budget every month. There isn't, for us, that wasn't our decision to make. We don't make cuts to the budget.
Let me sum up, because I think Mrs. Albin put this nicely in terms of we could go on and on about this, and that would be unfair, right? First of all, I do want to recognize the fact that we do have a great library, and you guys do very good work, and we appreciate it, and it's also very good what you do. Now, Mrs. Tierney, you're pointing to Ms. Ronald, which is very nice, but you all do, as well as the library board. And in tough discussions like this, do not diminish the respect we have for the work that's being done. That said, there's been several things tonight that I think were misunderstandings, miscommunications. I don't want to say misrepresentations because I don't think there was any intent, and that implies intent, and I don't believe that at all. That said, the reduction in library hours in the past year wasn't necessarily the result of a $108,000 cut. It was actually the result of an over $200,000 cut, which includes not filling that vacant position, right? And there could have been a different decision made. Now, and by the way, I make no judgment. Mr. Tetro and his administration have to do what they think is right for the town, and sometimes that's difficult calls based on the numbers you're seeing. So I don't mean that at all. I, for one, was not aware of the open positions in the library. That doesn't mean I would have made a different decision. It just means that until I heard that tonight, I was not aware of it. That said, there seems to be some general confusion over the budget itself. Okay? Let me be very clear. This is a $4 million budget, and you guys control it along with the first selectman. And if we go into every budget thinking that when 2/3 of a budget or 3/4 of a budget is headcount and that's untouchable, we do a disservice to the employees and we do a disservice to the town. This is a $4 million budget to run the library system, of which everything is on the table, correct? Now, in addition, as with other departments, okay, during the course of the year as circumstances change, line items sometimes get transferred one to another. Mr. Tetro is absolutely right. At the end of the year, we need to true up the accounts, and we need to make transfers in order for the budgets to equal the actuals. Okay? The practice has been, correct me if I go wrong, but that happens in September after the year is closed and the books are closed, correct? Or the books aren't closed, rather. Ms. Bassi will shoot me for saying that. But the year is closed. We know what the numbers are, and we know what the transfers need to be. We get quarterly updates on the budget. Mr. Tetro, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Gardner, Ms. Bassi, they all tell us at those quarterly updates. I'll give you an example. The fire department or the police department routinely have issues within their payroll lines. We're over here, we're under here, this is what's going on. So that we're never surprised at any given point that that type of thing happens. But that can happen during the course of a budget. So you should feel free to have those conversations with the finance staff as well as the first selectman to make sure that you understand the best way to manage your department. And that's really how I would summarize the rest of it. I would say we'll continue to go through the rest of this, and I'd ask if there's any other questions of us on this topic. Are there any? Or are we good? Mr. Tetro, do you have anything you'd like to add? I hope I didn't misrepresent the way you guys handle it internally. I don't think I did.
No, I think in simple form, I think Ms. Ronald looked at this based on the RTM cuts and looked at how she could maximize the library services and minimize the impact on the town. And I think it should be pointed out, as much as either the branch or the main was closed, between the two, they had the same service hours combined, so there was always one or the other was open throughout that time.
Right.
And I thought she did a very good job of managing that and balancing the needs of the town in that regard. And there's the second point is, again, the filling of that other position was something that, while considered, given the viewpoint at each kind of month along the path of last year, it was determined to keep that position vacant because of the concerns about the fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Mr. DeWitt, briefly, and Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, did you have something on this topic then before I
Yeah,
go to Mr. DeWitt?
just wanted to we're talking about moving budget numbers around, so I just want to throw a couple numbers out here to put things in perspective.
Please.
It's a $4.4 million budget
Yep.
for the current fiscal year. 3.45 of that is salaries and wages. 148 is fees and services, which are primarily required to maintain the software that the librarians use to run the library. So the remaining two numbers is $629,000 for library materials, which the library did adjust, and then $170 for everything else. The everything else includes utilities, water, utilities, electric, maintenance and repair, printing and binding, cleaning and janitorial supplies, parking permits for their employees. They're really not, so the number that you're talking about, there isn't a lot of give. And this is kind of like,
The only give is bodies.
exactly.
The whole town is.
That's the whole town. We're a service
whole town.
organization. Welcome to a service organization. I mean,
Exactly.
it is what it is.
Yeah. So that's where the movement would have had to be, was in the bodies.
Right. Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
A little bit new topic. Your staff, how much of your staff either benefits from Pequot or spends their time supporting Pequot? Because Pequot Library came in today and said, Pequot items checked out at the Main and Woods, some number, and then some Main and Woods checked out at Pequot. They're pretty low numbers based on your total circulation. So how much time does your staff spend supporting Pequot?
I can't quantify it, but I can describe what we do, if that helps a bit. We
All
share,
right.
we share the library computer catalog with Pequot and also with the Fairfield Museum. And that allows all records of each of these institutions to be visible electronically, which is a great service for the community. They do pay a portion of that maintenance cost a year, 1/3 of that cost. But there's also an additional staffing cost associated when you update software and when you have to train staff to use different functionalities with that, and we do that in-house at the main library. So in that way, we do support Pequot when it comes to technology. And we have for, I'm going to say at least 10 to 12 years when we decide to share this catalog. The other thing we do is we do pay out of our operating funds for the delivery between the three libraries. So that is a delivery system that happens 6 days a week, and that comes out of our operating funds. We also invited them
And
to
I'm
be-
sorry, delivery system means somebody gets in their car with
Yes.
100 books and drives them to Pequot
Yes.
Library or the branch, right?
Yes, and it's not just,
Is that a full-time position? somebody
no,
doing
it's a
that?
part-time position. It's only a few hours a week.
Okay.
But what it allows us, it's not just book delivery for patrons, any kind of materials that we are delivering between the systems to keep the library operational. For instance, we do all our processing of all our books at the central library, and that was an efficiency we put into place since I've been director, but those books have to get back to the other libraries in order to be used by the patrons. So we're moving supplies all the time, but part of that delivery system goes to Pequot, and we do pay for that.
Do they ever bring books back to you, or is it always your people going to get them?
It's our library car.
Okay. Now I want to talk revenue for a minute. So
Mm-hmm.
fines, this year you're on the hook for $92,000 of fines,
Mm-hmm.
which is unbelievable to me, actually. How much of those fines are collected from Pequot on behalf of the town?
We do not collect Pequot fines. These are just fines that we collect from the main and the branch. I am not privy to what they collect for fines that stay with them or come to the town. I'm not privy to that information. So this is just main and branch fines.
So they have a revenue stream that's not accounted for?
I don't know the answer to that question.
That's Pequot, so she's not aware of it.
I'm not part of that system, so I don't know.
Okay, well, Mrs. Gardner, I'll ask the question, because is this one of the, I know it's different than a town, I forget what department we were talking about the other day that had a separate independent revenue stream that was not accounted for in revenue, or was accounted for in miscellaneous. The blue bins and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
So, do we know if Pequot collects fines and just doesn't give it back to us? Or, I mean, they're all our books, right? So I'm curious, why
Well,
would they would collect fines on?
They buy their own books also. They have a collection budget that's not reflected here. I don't know what it is, but they
Uh-huh.
do have some monies that they fund books with, and they may collect fines on those books. I don't know the
But it
answer
suffices to say they're collecting fines on our books too, no? I mean, you'd think a number of books in the total system.
I'm not sure about that answer. I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Because we do not see a revenue stream coming back from the Pequot Library for fines on our books. If there are books, the fines are paid at the main or the branch library.
Okay. Did you have something, Linda, or? No, okay. All right, thank you.
I'm going to go to Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey, I think. I'm sorry, Mr. Tetro, ladies first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies, we're going back for a second, I wasn't,
And I did such a nice summation, too. Okay.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
I just want to comment. I think that it's absolutely fair for any member of the public or of this board to disagree with the decision that was made and to have an experience or a reaction to and a theory or feeling about why the decision was made. I do think it's unfair to assume an intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey. I'll go to Mr. Tetro, and then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Just wanted to clarify, as I would understand it, once the books go to Pequot Library, they could all be returned on time or could be properly renewed, and consequently, no fines would necessarily be due. Certainly not fines on every book that should. In the same way that if Pequot's books come here, which they do in a small percentage, we don't track those individually as to whether they're late or not, and don't return the money to Pequot if they were, or do we?
No, we don't track that.
So, and
It's
and because they
their
could be...
books, their fines, don't know what happens with the fines on their end.
Okay. When we request a book from Pequot, and we hand it out to one of the patrons of the Fairfield or the Fairfield Woods Branch Library,
Right.
if that book is returned late and there's a fine, is that money returned to Pequot?
No, because I don't believe we collect fines on their books.
Okay, so...
Go back to them,
so if
and they
they're-
would say, oh, okay, then we are going to, process a fine if it's late when it gets there. We do not collect fines on Pequot books,
Even if they're handed out by the Fairfield Library?
because we don't own those books.
Okay.
I'm confused because I take my library card and I go to the branch library and it says the one book you want is at Pequot. The next day it shows up and I return it 5 days late, and I just get away with the fee because I didn't know the system was intelligent enough to know that's a Pequot library book.
Yeah, it knows which library owns that book. There are different holdings.
Well, I should just take out Pequot library books.
Are we good with this one?
Why did I know you were going there, Mr. DeWitt?
Yeah.
To the first
Way
selectman.
too many ways I could go with that, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the first selectman, is it your intent, based on your knowledge of the town finances right now, that you're going to have this position be held open for the rest of this current budget year that we're in right now?
You're talking
13.
fiscal 13.
Yes.
At this point, probably through the end of the budget season to see if the position is still there.
Okay. What do you mean by whether the position's still there?
It may be cut by this board or may get cut by the RTM.
Okay.
If it's not, then...
And if they cut the contingency again, then you're gonna ask her to hold it open for the whole year again, if it makes it through?
That would depend on the amount of cut to the contingency and what else might crop up in the initial months of fiscal 14. All that being said, if this does go through, if the cuts are both knowable and quantifiable, then I would expect that that position would be filled.
I would like to make a request, through you, Mr. Chairman, of the administration and the library staff. If you can provide for me a financial analysis of some sort. If you take their budget, how much is spent on the main library and how much is spent on the branch library? A complete breakdown, staff, everything, so that I know how much the branch library is costing to keep open and how much the main library is kept to keep open.
I think I'm going to defer that question to the Finance Department. Do we have the numbers tracked that way, and can we provide that analysis?
The answer to the first question is no, we don't have the numbers that way. The answer to the second question, could we develop such an analysis? Not within the next week, that's for sure. I'd have to look and see how, we're talking about allocating costs, allocating overhead, allocating hours. I'd have to know more than I know now to make to make a judgment of the hours it would take to do that. Then I'd have to allocate the resource to do it. But we'll look at it.
I'd still make the request for whenever you can supply it.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'd be before the RTM votes. I think the town needs to know the cost of what each of the operations costs to keep open, so I'd make a request that that be done.
Yeah, I'll certainly look at it.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions on the library? I do have one. I'm gonna prove I want to prove that I read some of the emails that I get. So don't. This comes from several constituents have written this to me, and it's interesting vis-a-vis your materials, your supplies budget, right? And the emails come to me as, Dear Mr. Chairman, I was in the library and I noticed they have a collection of DVDs. Since when did we become Blockbuster? So how do we respond to that? And how much does it cost the town in DVDs? And again, I've gotten that question 4 or 5 times. And quite honestly, I don't have a good answer for it.
Well, the answer is when patrons come to us and request that we have different formats for their entertainment and information, librarians respond. And libraries have been providing movies to communities for about 15, 20 years, even in Fairfield. And someone would argue that film is one of our finest American original media formats, and we should have them in public libraries so they're accessible to all. I can't give you the numbers off the top of my head, but we do know that it is the second most popular item that is borrowed by Fairfield residents. We do know that. And they're not just used, we don't consider us another Blockbuster because some of those are actually documentaries. Certain people learn differently. They're visual learners rather than print learners or audio learners. So we have all sorts of things that actually help our lifelong learning too.
How do you determine what gets bought and what doesn't get bought?
We have a collection development policy that was passed by the board and written by 13 professional librarians. It's 30 pages. You can see it on the website, and it talks about how librarians purchase and how they select items. We're doing it continuously based on professional criteria.
Including DVDs and...
Yeah,
and-
absolutely.
Okay, so DVDs
Absolutely.
are included in that.
Absolutely.
And how much of the 500,000 or whatever the number is DVDs, do you know?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that. This is a significant amount of money because we do have a demanding public who wants movies in their library.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. I did not have the answer to that when it's been asked of me several times. And by the way, it's been phrased to me in exactly the way that I phrased it to you, so I appreciate your answer on that.
There is no more Blockbuster.
Yeah, which shows you that the business model doesn't work. So,
It does work when it's free.
right.
Yeah, okay.
Just don't tell that to Media Wave, please.
Right, exactly. Any other question, comments, concerns from this board? Yes, please, Chris. Mrs. Tierney, I'm sorry.
In light of that's all right. In light of, what's happened over this last year, the board has really taken this very seriously. We, per our minutes, which anybody can read, we have hired a grant writer to help to get additional funds because our librarians are so busy right now. They're having you know, we know the budget constraints, we know the stresses on the taxpayers. We're taxpayers, we do understand this. So we've hired a grant writer to help us write grants to get additional funds to offset this so it's not such a burden on the taxpayers. We take this very, very seriously. We love our library. We love our patrons. So I want you to know that we're doing everything that we can to support you guys in your jobs. It's not easy, and we do understand that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you guys do, as well as good luck. I know the construction process for the new roof will probably be a challenge at the Fairfield Woods branch. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for members of the public to make comment. Again, this is not questions, but it is comment. If you ladies would allow them to come up to your microphone, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out tonight. Good evening, Mrs. Orazio.
Good evening, Mr. Flynn.
She lives across the street from me, so she can throw eggs at my house.
I could, but I won't, ever. I promise. Good evening. I'm Donna Woods Orazio, and I live at 82 Coral Drive, across the street from Mr. Flynn. I'm the president of the Fairfield of the Friends of the Fairfield Library, and tonight I would like to speak in support of the library budget. And I ask all who are here tonight in support of the main library and the Woods Branch Library to stand in support also. 38,000 people have Fairfield Library cards, and for many families, 2, 3, or 4 members of that family use the card. There are many organizations in our town that make Fairfield unique and special, but 38,000 people have made a choice to obtain a public library card. In a recent survey that the Friends did, 95% of the people who responded think that the library is an essential service in Fairfield. More than 700 people filled one of the largest venues in Fairfield last week to hear the One Book, One Town author speak. At one time, the wait list for that one event was over 300 people. The Quick Center was filled with families, grandparents, fathers and daughters, college professors and students, members of our community who had read the book Wonder, which was the choice this year. They read the book together. During the question and answer session, the line at the microphone was 10, 12, or 15 deep of students, just kids who had read the book either in school or with their family. And they asked insightful questions, and they had heard the message of kindness. During the month of March, the library staff created 24 programs around the Obot book. Programs for children, teenagers, and adults. This is what the Fairfield Public Library does for our community. It brings people together. And for those who cannot get to the library goes to them. On the first Friday of every month, books are delivered to patrons through the Homebound Book Delivery Program. Carefully chosen books that are chosen by the library staff are delivered to people who cannot come, but it allows them to continue a lifelong passion, reading. I happen to be one who's privileged to deliver for the library on part of the town, and I sit with mostly women who want to read. They just can't get to the library. And when I show up with a bag of 8 or 10 books, they are thrilled. And it's one of those services that most people don't know about, but that reaches across to a piece of our population that would not be served otherwise. In the midst of Irene and Storm Sandy, the library became a community living room of sorts, a place for individuals and families to seek and find calm and safety in the midst of a chaotic time, to read a story together, to see a familiar face, to use a computer, charge their electronics, or simply pull up a chair, almost oblivious to the chaos, and read a book. The library served a vital role during the long days of uncertainty for so many. But our library is much more than just a library. The main library, Library and the Woods Branch Library engage our community. Job skill workshops, computer availability. Not everyone in Fairfield has a computer. They use the library continually. Resources, books, digital library items, programs, book groups, services for the visually impaired, writing workshops, space for our community organizations to gather. This and so much more happens within our library. And as noted before, people stand in line waiting for the doors to open. 38,000 people have made the choice to have a library card. So tonight I ask that the budget for the 2013-2014 library be approved as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rossi.
Good evening. Peter Ambrose, lifelong resident of the town of Fairfield, member of the RTM District 2. I been using the library, the main library, for 50 years plus. My wife is an avid visitor to the library. She belongs to several book clubs, so she's there all the time. I have a granddaughter at the age of 1 year and 3 months that's been going to the library, which is a relishing, wonderful thing that we have here. But I'm appalled tonight, listening to the rhetoric and finding out that we closed the library to our citizens for hours because of $72,000 or $80,000. And I find it shocking that this revelation wasn't brought to our attention before this time. For all the reasons mentioned by the prior speaker, we've got a great system, second busiest library in the state of Connecticut, one that we have relished. And to think that staff members were being paid while the library was closed to the citizens, I find that terribly disappointing. And again, to Mr. Brockfield's point with respect to the percentage of the total budget that could be used or should have been used to keep the library open, I just think there's a better way to serve the public's need. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Charles Chotkowski, last name spelled Chotkowski. My address is 1838 Black Rock Turnpike. I live less than a mile from the Fairfield Woods branch and make frequent use of it. I too have been inconvenienced by the lack of hours of opening, but this has been thoroughly discussed, and I have something else to talk about, which is the curtailment of interlibrary loan services offered by the Fairfield Public Library. Interlibrary loan enables the library to make available to its patrons books not in its collections that are held by other libraries. It is a cost-effective and efficient way to make available books that may be of limited interest, specialized topics long out of print, without having to add to the library's holdings. It makes available to local residents books in collections of major libraries across the country. I myself have been a frequent user of interlibrary loan services, and I want to publicly recognize the good work done by our interlibrary loan librarian, Laura O'Connor, and her predecessors. They have been most helpful in locating the books I need. However, last year's budget cuts limited greatly the ILL services available. You see, the library has 2 internet systems for requesting books on interlibrary loan. The first is called Request, or ICON, ICONN, which is made available by the Connecticut State Library. This covers books from within the state of Connecticut. For books from out of state, the library has used in the past the OCLC, the Online Computer Library Center, also known as First Search. As a result of budget cuts last year, the Fairfield Public Library canceled its subscription to OCLC and no longer requests books from out of state. This I regard as a deplorable state of affairs. Earlier this week, I made a telephone survey of 14 other libraries in Lower Fairfield County. I found that 9 of them subscribe still to OCLC and request books from out of state. The other 5 do not use OCLC and generally do not request books from out of state. The 9 that subscribe to OCLC for nationwide access are Stratford, Pequot in Southport, Westport, Norwalk, Wilton, Darien, New Canaan, Stamford, and Greenwich. The 5 that do not subscribe to OCLC are Bridgeport, Shelton, Trumbull, Easton, and Weston. I think they're all smaller towns than Fairfield, with the exception of Bridgeport, which has its financial problems. My understanding is that the priority of the library administration is to restore hours and restore the acquisition of materials before they would resume their subscription to OCLC. So I would request this board to make an ample increase in their appropriation. The people of Fairfield deserve a full-service library. Fairfield can afford a full-service library. This board, therefore, should budget funds for a full-service library. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Please, or not board members, from members of the public, thanks. I would ask, and sir, don't take any offense to this, keep our comments as brief as we can so we can move along and everybody else gets a chance to speak. So thank you. And that wasn't meant at the last speaker, it's meant in general. So feel free.
I came last, I talked fast.
Yeah, very quickly.
All right, well, that being said, I'll see you guys later. I am one of the people that.
Please give your name and your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lee Hannum, District 10. I'm an RTM representative. I live on Roland Road.
Thank you.
I'm one of the people that is in arrears with my library fines. I've owed over $2.75 for probably a year now. So just take me away now. But I'm part of the problem. Okay. I'm here as a proponent of the library. The increase that they're looking for right now is a speck compared to the overall budget in this town. And I think, and I speak for the people that I talk to on a regular basis, that the library is something that everyone uses or knows about. Whether they go there every day or every week, it doesn't really make any difference. A library is something that is part of the fabric of the town. And I was kind of disheartened to hear that we cut our hours because of some little blip in the budget. And that's beside the point. That's not my business. That's a budgetary situation. But a library to be open from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 or till 9 o'clock at night would be great. I'd love to see it. I'd love to hear it. I know we can't do it. But in the big picture, a little speck, a 0.9% increase in what we had last year after a $100,000 decrease based on whatever the situation was. I'm going to support it as an RTM rep. I would implore you to say, okay, the library wants this much, we're going to give them this much, and whatever you give them, I'm going to vote for. Any questions?
Thank you.
No, I don't have 275.
Grab him, Karen.
All right. Any other comments from members of the public? Sir?
My name is John Austin, and I live on Stratfield Road. I also am a supporter of restoring the library hours. It doesn't have to be 100% restoration, but I miss the Sunday hours and the early closing on certain days of the week. One of the budget items that was cut was the budget for periodicals. And I think that we need a sense of balance in that cut. We've at the Fairfield branch, we've had a number of women librarians who are managing it, and so as a result, we don't have on the shelf a magazine which has international circulation and is a journal, really, of the whole world of aviation. It's called Aviation Week. What we do have is a large number of what I call girl magazines. We have Shape, Self, Glamour, More, Health, Fitness, Elle, Taste of Home, Woman's Day, and so, I could go on and on and on, but I think there should be a more balanced view of what we have on the shelf. I also think that when we run what amounts to a daycare center for the kids from the neighboring schools, so the junior high school and I think there's an elementary school, that should be part of the Department of Education's budget, the additional staffing and supplies and equipment that are necessary for that. And finally, I would like to see our library expenses compared with the West Hartford Library, which is comparable, almost the same size, and in an affluent community, because I think we might learn something from what they do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I can assure you that this board doesn't make the decisions regarding the periodicals, though I am told Mr. Tetro is heavily involved in the selection of the
There'd be a lot more issues of Sports Illustrated on account if there were.
Okay. Do we have any other? Mary Ellen.
Hi, Mary Ellen McLean, member of the Board of Library Trustees for 8 years. Just to clarify 2 points that were raised, I'm not sure if the members of the board understand that most of the staff within the library, outside of the library director, are actually members of the 2 unions within the town. So in terms of being able to eliminate positions, as might have been suggested, that is something that is really out of Ms. Ronald's ability. That's in terms of union, because that comes down to union negotiations and human resources. So maybe you're saying that it is possible, but I just wanted to clarify that. And also to clarify, yes, the library hours were cut, but as Mr. Tetro did say, that Ms. Ronald worked very hard to make sure that we had one library building open every day as much of the full hours as possible. So on Saturdays in town, the main library doesn't open until 1, but the branch is open in the morning, but then the main library picks up for the afternoon hours. On Sunday, it's the main library that's open, but the branch is closed. And then during the week, we have the same thing that we've tried to make sure that the library, we did have a library building that was open to be able to serve our patrons. And that was the best way that we can accommodate what we were expected. The other thing that I will add is that I've been on the library board for 8 years, as I said, prior to even Mr. Tetro with Mr. Flato as first selectman. We were never told or never allowed to, as you said, move, or it was never explained to us in terms of being able to accommodate for payroll if we were not staffed in one area. Or if we were asked not to staff, that we could move payroll numbers down to any other line items. And that's the way it has been for as long as I've been on the Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll bring this budget to the close. Is there any comments, final comments or thoughts from board members on this item?
I had a quick question.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, sir. Back to this gentleman's comment before about the OCLC subscription. Karen, what does that roughly cost a year? What is the subscription?
Yeah. Just, well, we can, if you want to say it, we can repeat it into the microphone.
Just roughly.
Yeah.
OCLC is not something we actually have cut completely out of our budget. It's really an international database where we actually upload the records for our books and our library materials, saving about a full-time staff, which we figure is what, $60,000 or $70,000. So
Plus
now we're paying
benefits.
about $18,000 a year to have this service. We did cut back, in fact, on our interlibrary loan for budget reasons. So yes, he is correct that we're only getting interlibrary loans through the state. But we still have OCLC because it actually provides other services too.
Thank you.
I could find out. I haven't thought about it for a while. I can check with technical
That's okay.
services.
A follow-up is fine. Thank you very much.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Any other comments from board members? Seeing none, everyone, thank you for coming out for the library tonight. I'm going to ask for about a 5-minute recess now. Good evening, everybody.
You don't share?
Congratulations. We're going to call the meeting back to order. If the people in the back can remain a little bit quieter, I would appreciate it, as would board members. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Welcome. We're and my apologies for the lateness of the hour, not to be entirely unexpected.
Something I said.
Yeah, but you really know how to clear a room there, Mr. Lombardo.
I'm good at that.
Yeah, we should have you come more often.
Must be that tie, Jerry.
Yeah,
Snoopy, I figured it'd help. Right?
yes.
Cheerful.
It's hard to be mean this Snoopy. Okay, we're in the recreation part of the budget now. We're going to go through the Penfield Pavilion, Park and Recreation proper, Waterfront Marina, South Pine Creek Golf Course, and Smith Richardson Golf Course. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I'll turn it over.
Okay. Good evening, Jerry Lombardo, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I have Dante Glue.
Use the microphone, Jerry, please.
Jerry Lombardo,
245.
Director of Parks and Recreation, and I have with me the Chairman of the Parks and Recreation Commission, Dante Galucci.
Welcome, Mr. Galucci.
Good evening. Thank you.
This evening, I'm here to present our budget of Penfield, Parks and Recreation, Waterfront, and the 2 golf courses.
Okay.
The Penfield budget, as proposed, is approximately a 3.4% increase. However, as you all know, we've had, we're not open at this time, and we don't foresee the facility being open, the building itself being open until approximately December, January timeframe. So as such, I'm recommending to the Commission, to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, that we reduce that budget number by $32,666. That's a revised, so the new budget should be $73,889.
And which line item, Mr. Lombardo, just so we're clear, is that in the payroll
Okay.
line item?
Pass this out, you want to pass this? Seasonal payroll, a reduction of $24,708.
24 what, Jerry?
$24,708. I'm sending around a sheet of all the cuts, if you want. Social Security, $358 reduction. Utilities, water, a reduction of $2,100. Buildings, maintenance, buildings and grounds, $1,500. Cleaning and janitorial supplies, $2,500. And special department supplies, $1,500. If my math is correct and I used the computer correctly, it should be $32,666.
Mr. Lombardo, let me ask the obvious question. If the pavilion isn't going to be open for the summer months, which are arguably the largest months of activity for the pavilion, why is the payroll not going down by more, considering it's starting out at 83, it's only going down by 24, and you're leaving 58?
Because we plan on having rentals from January through June. I still have boat attendants over at Penfield. I still have parties from July 1 at Jackie Durrell. So that takes care of the balance of the payroll.
So the answer is that it's not just for the Penfield that's been damaged, it's also
For
for
the
Jackie
complex.
Durrell.
It's for the complex.
Mhm. Okay. Mr. DeWitt, you had a question?
Yeah, so there's no part of Penfield Pavilion we can use the lockers or any portion
Correct.
of that, is that correct?
Correct.
What do you see as the revenue reductions? I got to assume that those are going to be just zeroed out, basically?
For fiscal year 14, and I'll pass this out. I'm passing out a revenue fiscal comparison report of profit and loss for all the entities that we'll be discussing this evening, as well as attached to it will be the Recreation Trust Revolving Fund numbers, and that is not part of the general fund budget, it's pay-as-you-go, and as well as capital expenditures out of the trust fund for the past 4 years. And when I say capital, there might have been, approximately 30,000 to anything from $15,000 to $30,000.
Mr. Lombardo, thanks for the information. Before we get into it, because I know you were kind enough to give me an advance preview of it, to Mr. DeWitt's question, you've passed out a document that has $32,000 worth of adjustments on the expense side due to the closure of Penfield for that period of time, the main Penfield building. Should we assume, and Mr. DeWitt, I think this is your question, that there is a reduction from the budget before us in revenue as well, or has that already been taken into account in the revenue lines?
And for fiscal year 14?
Yes.
The numbers are reflected on the sheet and in the budget book.
Okay, so there's no adjustment from the budget book for revenue that's already been taken into account? It's
Correct.
only the expense reductions that are not reflected in our budget book?
It's only the expenses.
So-
Okay? In the budget book, however, okay, there may be an increase once the season is over when we deal with the insurance loss of business that we're entitled to. But we only net that out. Okay? So for instance, and it also affect fiscal year 13. For instance, on the revenue side for fiscal year 13, we anticipated $38,000 for the lockers in revenue. Okay? Because that's approximately what we get
Sure.
every year. When I net it out, I have to net out staffing out of that, and we're in the process of going through that now.
So basically, you'll get reimbursed on your business interruption insurance
Correct.
to the effect that there's profit?
Yes.
So I guess, so you said that this December, we should be reopening. So I guess I don't.
hoping.
Sorry?
We're hoping.
Yeah, right, hopefully. But there's a seasonal locker line for this budget of $38,000. Don't you make most of that money between, June and December, or July and December, which is this budget, right? Because this budget starts July 1st of 2013, right?
All our lockers are sold, okay? We sell them in March to June. We have them sold before the season really starts. That is why, and if you look at this, for the lockers,
Yeah?
that is why, and that's why it's very difficult, because we're crossing fiscal years. Even though we're a season, we cross fiscal years. The 38,000 that I projected in 12-13, okay, when we finish the claim, which we'll be working on, it may be after the books are closed, we'll get reimbursed, let's just say 30,000, if I had $8,000 worth of expenses. So that's, okay. But I didn't reflect it on my profit loss because we're not there yet. We have other paperwork, but we're still working on it. Do you follow? Everything.
No, I'm really not. It sounds like people pay a year
No,
ahead of
no.
time?
Let's just say let's say Penfield was open this June, we didn't have any issue.
Right.
Right now, we would be taking in locker money for July 14.
Got it.
But July 14's, or July 13, but the fiscal year 14. Follow what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay.
So you're,
I already
part
took-
of your estimate is that you're going to retrieve some of this money through insurance claim?
Correct. Well, no. We're anticipating we're going to be open next year at this time.
Jerry, if I might, it's a timing issue.
Yeah.
The pavilion's going to be closed this summer.
Right.
The locker revenue would have been paid in yesterday for this summer. So we're losing it
Yeah.
in fiscal 13 for this summer, even though part of the summer's in 14. The locker revenue that was included in fiscal 14 is budgeted for March of 14 for the summer of 14, for next year, for fiscal 14 and fiscal 15. So the pavilion will be back up and running on January 1st. Next March will be a normal revenue month. So fiscal 14 is not short of locker revenue. Fiscal 13 is short of locker revenue.
Oh, okay.
So
It
basically-
seems like we have 6 months of inactivity and we're still got the same revenue.
Yeah,
That's
but what
that's where I'm
happens-
missing it, I
they-
guess, maybe.
no,
We're
no,
losing it, we're losing it in this year.
Yeah, but what's happening is it's revenue recognition. They're recognizing it when they receive the cash. They typically receive the cash in March for the
No,
go-forward year,
I
right?
understand.
Yes, we have to
So
put
you're
it
gonna
in
show
the
it
fiscal year
diminished.
that we collected it.
So basically, Chris, your point would be valid on accrual-based accounting.
Right, but it's...
But it's cash-based, so this year they're going to be short 38 grand because they're not getting it, because they can't rent it for this season.
Got it.
They'll get it next March for the 14 summer.
We really collect in the year before fiscal year for the next year.
That for partial of that year and for the rest of the,
And then the insurance proceeds are not comprehended in the budget, so that's a positive upside. But it will be netted out against the expenses, so it's not on the gross amount of revenue, it's on a smaller number.
it is confusing because it's cash-based, it's just based on collections.
You ought to try putting it together.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I'll entertain any more questions on Penfield.
Mary, Mrs. Leclerc, I'm sorry.
Since Penfield will be closed, what are your plans for restrooms for the summer?
That's what we're working on. We're looking on putting portable restrooms down there, whether I look at a trailer, okay, or whether I just put, half a dozen outhouses. But even that will be reimbursed, our expenses on that will be reimbursed by the insurance.
Okay, so we don't need a budget for that?
No, we will, what I'll do is I'll pay for it out of a line item, and you'll either, however fiscally you want to do it, I'll take it out of maintenance, and then you'll transfer it in when it comes in, or you'll just, you'll cover it at the end of the year.
Good, thank you.
So
And
the
there's
bottom
other-
line, regardless of how we account for it, it's being paid for through our insurance, so there's no cost to the town.
I was told we'd be reimbursed for it when we do it. Anything like that, I have to come up with some type of portable first aid lifeguard station, okay? And I have to look at asking the concessionaire to come up with some type of vending. The problem is where can I put it? Because there's not a lot of room left between the two buildings. And if they're going to be doing construction during the summer months, so we really don't have a lot of room, and I don't want to put things out in the parking lot where I'm going to have children going to get on ice cream or something like that. So I'm working on it, but the commission does want us to try to have some type of food service down there. But then again, that relates to what we would have, that would be netted out of what the concession monies the insurance company would have paid us.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Ms. Leclerc, anything else? Anybody else? Mr. Brockville.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Jerry, I have a question that's kind of a continuing interest of mine, much like others on the board have some continuing questions. And one I have for you is,
That's right.
Is there anything in our town charter or policies that restricts us from, when, I mean, Penfield's obviously not operational now, but when it's fixed, from leasing out that space to a restaurant or a professional catering company and let them pay us a rental fee for the use of what I think is a magnificent space, gorgeous views on the beach, et cetera, and take us out of a business that I don't think we belong in, along with a lot of other businesses I don't think we belong in. And have we explored that? Have we priced it out? Have we put it out for bid? I mean,
The answer is simple. No, we haven't looked at it. We've talked about it, not commission-wise, but I've visualized it. You say a restaurant, that topic was brought up several years ago, and it was a neighborhood concern. Okay? I haven't looked at outsourcing it to a catering company and doing it. One reason we haven't is that our revenues exceed, in this particular instance, our cost. So it's not like, and it's not like a burdening, hard to manage facility the way we operate it presently. So those are the reasons that from a summer, from that type of usage. We were just beginning to pick up in rentals because, it caught on. Now, and in this budget, I, did include a marketing, small sum of $3,000, but we'd already started spending money on internet marketing, wedding planners and that sort of thing, marketing out to them, and we were beginning to get a lot of interest for the rental hall. But the answer is no, I haven't. But there is nothing that prevents the town from us outsourcing if the commission wishes to look into that and bring it forward to the Board of Selectmen.
I appreciate that answer. I would just respond to this in particular, but in a general sense, and also to the First Selectman and maybe the CFO, that, first of all, thank you. I think you're one of the people who come before us who have nothing but the best interest of the town at heart. So thank you, and thank you for all your service. I do take issue, though, with one part of your answer, which is that, we might not want to examine it. I'm not saying you said this, but because our, the revenue we're bringing in is somehow or another offsetting the cost, and therefore we're making money. That's not a proper way to evaluate the cost-benefit of an item like that, because hypothetically, someone might look at this thing and think it's a gold mine and be willing to pay us multitudes more. I don't know this, by the way, but they could. So and I think the same would apply to golf courses and tennis courts and a lot of amenities that we have, or assets, marinas. So I'm just saying that I think it would be very, very good for the town. And maybe at the end of the day, we'll find out it's not a good way to utilize our assets, right? But I think that the town, and so this is not just for you, but for the administration, to look at all of these town assets as more of a potential profit center, while still obviously keeping them available for the town residents to enjoy.
And I appreciate that, and just to make one note, when I have reviewed the topic of Penfield, there's a lot of complexity issues that come into play, and that's parking, for instance, okay? You got to pay to park during the summer, okay? So there's those type of issues that we'd have to work out. But no, it is workable. It's just that I just know the sentiment of the years that it wasn't something that the community, I'll say the community, okay, for lack of better, didn't wish to look into.
I just finish up by saying that unfortunately...
Times are changed.
Right. Unfortunately, the sentiment of the years, I think, is changing. We all hear it every night at our hearings, and we read it in our emails. And again, this is not to pick on Penfield particularly. It just happens to be what came to mind while you were sitting there. So thanks very much.
Any other comments, questions from board members on Penfield? Mr. Lombardo, the... very, very briefly, just because we're on here, give us the Reader's Digest version of where do we stand on fixing that building and what's going on right now? Just because I know you're saying December, just tell me.
Presently, they're in the design phase.
Yeah.
We currently have 3 consultants concurrently working on the redesign on the building. Race, a coastal engineering firm from Stratford, that will analyze the dynamics of the waves and the surge action at this location. Heller and Johnson, a geotechnical engineering firm from Stratford that will design the new foundation. And J.M. Albin, a structural engineer from Waterford, will redesign the structural beams which support the building, and he's the leading leading the overall effort. And we're looking at different scenarios. The building's got to be raised, when we came to you for the funding. At the time, there was questions, should we put it right back in the same spot? When it was raised, at the time, we've been thinking, should we move it back somewhat into the parking area to offset any velocity because of the new V zone? It's considered a V zone, and that's why it's got to be moved. So all these things are being looked at, and we hope to have a report probably in 2 or 3 weeks.
I would encourage something on this from that viewpoint. Thank you for the answer. There's been a lot of discussion amongst the townspeople about Penfield and the damage that was sustained and how we go about fixing it, and should it have been built that way in the first place, and were things done appropriately. This is one of those cases where I think updating the public for better or for worse on what was done well, what was done poorly, if anything was done poorly, what the efforts are. I think that's really important in this one, because it seems to be something that when I'm out walking around, I'm sure my colleagues, we've talked about this, you hear a lot of things about, boy, you guys spent a lot of money on Penfield, and look what happened in one storm, and the other building lived 100 years, and this one, you had so much damage after one storm. This wasn't done well. Hey, I've heard rumors of this. Hey, this wasn't done well. And it'd be really good to put together some type of discussion document and distribute it through the local press or whatever to say, here's the story of what happened. Here's what we did. Here's where we succeeded. Here's what we didn't allow for. Here's what we found. Here's what we're doing differently. Just to give them, to the extent you can, some peace of mind as to how that project has been managed in the past and how it's going to be managed going forward. That's my impression, because without that information out there, there's a lot of rumor and innuendo that goes around, and I don't know if anybody would care to comment on that.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yeah.
I think there are 2 thrusts that Jerry I and Joe Michelangelo have talked about from this standpoint. One is the structure itself, what happened, what are we doing to repair, why will that be better than what was there before? The second thrust, which may be less obvious if you don't live in the beach area, was because a lot of the water that flooded that neighborhood came through there for the neighborhood from their concerns about how are you going to present that. So the goal all along was to make sure that we provide some public forums to explain what happened, both at not only the Board of Selectmen meeting, but perhaps some neighborhood meetings with folks down there to explain to them what's taken place.
And while I think those are excellent ideas, there's going to be a lot of people that won't go to a neighborhood meeting, and there's going to be a lot of people that won't go to the, go to the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Your point's well taken. We'll make sure that we.
I don't know, does anybody else, Mr. Stone, I don't want to. Okay. Does anybody have any comment on this particular one? Mr. Brown?
When, have you thought about when we would get updates on where we're at, cost-wise, just design-wise? I'm talking about this board.
This board? Yes, I can speak with Joe Michelangelo. He's really spearheading the construction end of it. But yes, we can speak to it, and when we get the information, we can give you
How about-
a report as,
Quarterly meeting?
How about a quarterly meeting? We'll either get a brief little written summary, or else, if
come
necessary,
here.
just a
Okay.
brief conversation on that. That'd be,
Yep.
would that work,
That
Mr.
will
Brown?
work, yeah.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm hearing the same kind of comments, and one of the things that I just heard the other day, funny enough, is that the pavilion looks, I forget what the exact word was, but it's boarded up, it's got the big orange squares on it, and one of the comments, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I was going to bring it up and was totally forgot about it. Is there a way to, I hate that we use the word pretty it up, but it's like one of the few things on that street that still has orange crosses on it and plywood. I mean, I see houses going up, and, you know, it seems like there's improvement all around us except for that. So maybe aesthetically something, but...
Actually, if you drive through the beach area, there's a lot of houses that are both under construction, ready to be demolished, and have orange squares on them. I think.
I mean,
one
in
of
that general area.
Yeah, one of the questions, I think, would be, when do we anticipate construction starting?
not until the end of June.
Okay.
That was, well, and that was 2 months ago, so but it was basically the end of June by the time we put bids out and everything.
And then the only last thing is, the second most frequent question is, am I going to get my locker there this year? I don't think we've gone out and said, no lockers this year. Have we formally done that?
Oh, yeah, we put it on the internet, and I believe my staff has put it in the paper.
Okay.
Okay, but I know that we put it on our webpage.
Okay. Great, thanks.
I just want to share with you, because one, and this is just a quick note, you can pass around, but as you recall, everybody always wanted to know how that building stood 100 years, you know, how to survive the other storms. Well, as you see this, it really didn't. This is a picture, I think, from 1940. Okay, I just happened to get that the other day. One of my staff members sent it to me, and so when you look at it, you'll see it was a lot bigger, and it was out in a parking lot, and there was a lot of wings that weren't there. So obviously, it mustn't have made it through some of the storms.
Understood, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Mr. Stone, please.
Yeah, the first selectman asked what I was going to ask, when construction's going to start. But how confident are you that it'll be ready for the following season?
Next season?
Yeah. Are we confident?
I'm only going by what I'm told.
Yeah, I just don't know
Yeah.
all the rules, regulations, and...
No, I believe it's going to be ready. I
Hope so,
mean,
yeah.
I'm told that it's going to be ready, you know, I thought it was going to be ready by July.
No, we knew that.
Okay? You know, but from what I'm told and from the meetings I've been in, you know, the kickoff and everything, because I had to say, I need to plan. They're building it, but I need to plan because I'm dealing with the public and I need to, you know, like bathrooms, so portable outdoor shower, that sort of thing, so that, so I need to plan. But I'm told that it'll be ready by, and again, it might it be January, but I'm told it's a 6-month rebuild.
The other thing, I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Brackfeld said. I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, you know, that would be a great restaurant for the town, you know, in that area. And I don't want to micromanage anything or anything like that, but it really would be, and it could probably generate a lot more money, and the restaurant could be open year-round, too. So it's just a comment, but I
Nope,
just hope the
I
thing gets
appreciate
built.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on Penfield? Is there somebody down there? All right. Any questions, comments, or rather, comments from the public on Penfield? All right, seeing none, we're going to go to the Park and Recreation proper, as I call it, budget, which is 247 through 250.
Yeah, this budget is particularly a status budget. But I took another look at areas where I thought maybe I could reduce some of our costs, particularly after I saw, you know, when I heard the tax increase, and I took another look at it. One area that I look at is our summer tennis program. We run it from basically the middle of May to second week of September. And then we have the 20-year lease that's going into effect with the Fairfield Indoor Tennis. We manage it. I'm not sure that we do the, we provide a nice service, but we don't have the expertise of actually running tennis. I put down, I put there. So my recommendation is, and my commission supports the idea, is that we look into outsourcing that for the summer. I have spoken with Fairfield Indoor Tennis, who I would like to collaborate with, because obviously they're putting in a new facility that costs about approximately $2 million. The way we had the contract written is that we would be sharing that space with them. So we'd have to do some type of amendment or addendum or something to the existing contract. But I'm looking at turning it over, if this commission or board and Board of Selectmen agree with our commission of outsourcing this. It would be a savings of approximately $34,700 in expenses on the salary end, approximately $9,300 in the maintenance end. That's the spring opening. $3,000. I'm just going to say of that $3,000, it's probably $1,500 to $2,000 in miscellaneous benches, brooms, the maintenance of the tennis courts. And then some other areas that I found, the Memorial Day Parade. I've gone through the books, and we normally spend about, I had $24,000 budgeted. We spend about, on average, 18 to 20, so I reduced at that, and then there was a couple of minor little things. So I am recommending that we reduce that budget by $51,400. And with those two programs together that I mentioned between Penfield, now we have to remember Penfield will not be a reduction forever. It'll be a one-year reduction. But for the fiscal year 14, I am recommending that, or a total reduction of $84,000. I did look through the rest of the budgets that I have, and there's really no areas to, without affecting service and revenues, it'd be difficult for me to find any more funding.
Yes. Jerry, could you just, I love the direction you're taking, obviously. Could you just walk us through with a little more, I'm very interested, detail, what's involved with outsourcing the summer tennis? In other words, I understand, obviously, the projections of reduced expenses that you just described. What's the other side look like? In other words, how do we get paid by someone to have them run it, and so
Well,
forth?
I spoke with the management of the Fairfield Indoor Tennis. He'd be looking at, because we want to make sure that it would work and the way we envision it would work. His goal is not to become rich off of the summer. His goal is to provide tennis and promote it, and it would help his winter business. By the same token, he believes some of his winter people would be. So he gave me a little insight, and we talked about it. Would offer, and again, this is just a very preliminary, okay, offers to operate the summer tennis at tennis centers for a 5-year term, starting July 1, 2013. Pricing will be mutually agreed upon and approved by the Parks and Recreation Commission. One thing I don't want to do is have a private, tennis people come in and charge excessive summer fees. Fairfield Indoor Tennis will receive the pass holder fees and any income generated by the summer tennis facility during the term of the lease. Fairfield Indoor Tennis will be responsible for all tennis maintenance, hiring, and paying all necessary staff and associated expenses. The rent schedule would be year one, $27,000. I was projecting $37,000. We average about $35,000. And the reason I upped it this year was I hired a lot of his staff, I am using it, and they came in with some innovative ideas of making a little bit more money. Year two would be $29,000. Year three, $31,000. Year four, $33,000, and year five, $35,000. Yeah, year five, $35,000. Again, these are preliminary numbers. I believe, he pays higher salaries than us. His expenses are going to be higher. So that's what I'm looking at. I think it would be successful. And it was also part of the, Mr. Tetro had asked me, and I neglected to follow through on it because I basically forgot. Okay, I'm not going to say anything else, but it came through the audit, if you recall, 2 years ago, I think it was, that why are we running summer tennis? And we were in the middle of other things. I did, the first selectman just had me to look into it. I did. I didn't follow through enough, and till recently I said, now's the time to look at it. So that's what I'm recommending.
Mr. Bradfield, please.
Thanks. Again, thank you. First, you get an H for honesty, right, for admitting you're
An
forgetful.
H?
Honesty, H, Tom, H, honesty, yeah.
I can never get an A.
Right.
Can't get enough, apparently.
I only have one concern, what you're doing, the way you're talking about it, and I just want to express it. Again, everything you're doing here is terrific, and I imagine that the town, I hope, will be watching this carefully as a template for possibly other applications. The only thing that concerns me, the way you described it, is I can see the obvious reason why you'd want to work with the existing indoor tennis people for the summer, right? There's all sorts of reasons to have the same group there. But if you were doing it on a one-year deal, I'd be more comfortable, but a 5-year deal, you're locking in a deal without really testing the market at all. So I would recommend that we, even if our intention is to try and work with the existing people, I would like to see us bring in 1 or 2 or 3 other potential people who can run it and see what kind of projections and payments and bids and so forth that they would lay out to make sure we're not mispricing this, right? Because we misprice it for 1 year as an experiment, that's really no problem, right? Then we could use the information we have and then renegotiate or do whatever. But a 5-year lock-in just concerns me a little bit. And then I would also add that I don't think there's really much of a risk of a private company coming in and overpricing the product, because there's a market for tennis courts, and if they charge too much, people just won't come and play, or they'll go somewhere else. And therefore, the people will charge what the market will bear. So in of itself, that doesn't really concern me, unless somebody wants to take over the facility, put ridiculous prices, and have nobody come, right? But nobody's going to do that. So I would just urge you to maybe examine a competitive bid situation if you're willing to lock in a 5-year deal. That's all. Because this thing could be worth a lot more than we realize. It's a nice facility. I've played there. It's beautiful, Hartrue courts.
Right. Yes, I agree with, and only because of the timing, maybe a 1-year deal would be the way to go, because if I'm trying to implement it by July, that you might be, we might be better off, and then we could look at putting out a bid. As I said earlier, it was, and I'd have to read our 20-year contract, because, again, the way we wrote it was that we were going to be in there, not ABC Company. Okay? Because we have a lot of cost sharings in there. So, but yes, we can look at that, and I said, there's a lot more thought that needs to go into it.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Thank you, Mr. Brockfield. Any other question? Anyone else? Great. I want to turn our attention to the documents that Mr. Lombardo passed out. First of all, he was kind enough to walk me through these a little bit the other day, and I want to thank you because this is a huge step forward. Basically, we've been pushing Mr. Lombardo for quite some time, specifically on the golf courses, on giving us a fully allocated P&L, and through his work with the finance department, our own clerk, as well as his own staff internally, they were able to develop the P&L document before us, which lays out each of the services that he provides. So I'll turn it over. I just want to recognize the efforts on that and say thank you for that. That's very useful. And if you could walk us through the document, because I think it's very telling and should be a good management tool for you going forward.
Thank you. Basically, this looks at each one of our entities that we operate. Obviously, my estimate, it shows the actuals, because if you notice in the estimated 14, I actually show the budgeted expense. Okay? So I do these at the end of the season, knowing what my actual expenditures were, but the revenues would be also projected, and then we put those in. I put any bonding that I get through the, on Penfield. I put that in there. I usually don't have any unemployment costs with that particular program. Same thing with the waterfront. Okay. And as you can see, all these entities primarily make money. When you get down to the Parks and Recreation, okay, that is the administration of all these other entities, okay? That's what it primarily covers.
So within the general fund, Mr. Lombardo, if we were to take all the revenues and all the expenses that you're responsible for, your revenues for the total program, and this is separate from the revolving fund, which is the next couple of pages. Basically, what you're projecting is for next year, you're going to have 3.9, let's call it $4 million worth of revenue. You have $3.2 million worth of expenses. You have the bonding amortization for the bonds related to these facilities of $121,000. The unemployment costs related with the whole seasonality of some of these functions of $29,000. So your total net income for all these is $618,000.
That is correct. That's our estimate. And as you see, if you look at the past from '09 to 12, you can see the actual balance, net income that we did bring into the general fund.
Now, in going into next year, you are down several $100,000 in revenue. Is that all related? If I look at this quickly, I could see it. That's mostly related to Penfield, or no?
Yes. Should be approximately 180,000, I think my number was.
And then you're actually down a substantial amount. Okay, one item to point out here, that Mr. Lombardo did point out to me, we're also down, if you look, there's $75,000.
Oh, yes.
That's included in the last couple of years, and it started as $100,000 in 2010. You'll recall that that was an appropriation from the revolving fund. So we actually took monies from the revolving fund, which are the next two pages, and we added into revenue to offset some of the costs on the general fund side. So the net income for the last couple of years are inflated by $100,000 one year and then $75,000 the other 2 years, related to really what was a transfer of revenue from the revolving fund, from that fund balance.
Correct. And that was over and above the policy that we have with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, that the policy is anything over $200,000 would be given back to the general fund. And the reason I eliminated that this year, and I have the report on the revolving fund that are starting, and we don't run on the same fiscal year just so the new members of the board know, we run basically from, we start on October 1 and we run to September 30th.
Let's stop right there. That's only for the revolving fund.
Only for the revolving
The
fund.
rest of it is definitely on a fiscal year, but
Yes.
the revolving fund is on the, more along the summer months, right?
And-
I mean,
Correct. It's the timing as to when our programs begin and end, and the major amount of our money comes in and goes out. But as you look through the, you'll see on page 2 of the revolving fund report that there's areas we pay for, okay, you'll see no income, but we still run the programs. And one of the bigger ones that may stand out is the credit card fees, okay?
Percent of your expenses.
That is from all the other, the golf courses, the beach stickers, the waterfront activities, Penfield rentals. So a lot of those things are in this budget, not tied into the general fund expense. Otherwise, I'd have line items. We used to have it, if you recall, and then we took it out and put it in here. I can't sustain moving forward, okay, paying those fees as well as contributing funds from that, from our fund, to the general fund. So those are the type of, that's how we come up with the numbers.
so Mr. Kiley, this answers a question that you've asked almost every year I've ever been here, which is what's the balance of the revolving fund as of October?
140K. Thank you.
Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight and for all of this information in this way. It's very helpful, so thanks to everyone who helped provide this. So specifically about the credit card fees, and I actually have been remiss tonight, I didn't ask the library. I've been asking everyone, or trying to ask everyone about efficiencies and technological means to make things more efficient. I will say that you all have done a phenomenal job in terms of automating and providing accessibility via the website for people to have access. Obviously, there's a cost associated with that in terms of doing business. Question to you is, have any other means been explored in an effort to reduce these fees? And specifically, I'm thinking about some of the, I don't know the name of it, the little square that is used in places. Are there any conversations about trying to get those fees lower?
I'd love to get the fees low. The fees that we pay are not only credit card fees, but it's support fees. It's all lumped into, the 3% or 5% or whatever. We pay 3% over the counter, and you pay more on the internet, but it's, okay. We were going to originally, when we brought the system in, we were thinking of having, and I'm trying to think of the terminology, but have the user pay for it. But we really were afraid that it wouldn't work, because people, why would you pay an extra $3 or $5 when you can drive down and do it? Since we've implemented the technology, I have reduced, okay, well, I had 3 part-timers, okay, and we're down to 1 part-timer. For most of the year, we do bring in somebody during the beach season for a few weeks to help with beach stickers. So we have been able to lower. We also find that we do have more time to, be able to generate reports because we have the data and everything with us. Technology is a great thing when it works. We do have issues with some of our program, particularly when we had a large registration. But we're finding that over 70% of our registrants are coming through the internet. It's a convenient way of doing it. The system could be better, and we are trying to improve it. But yes, it works.
Great. Just thank you for your comments. So it sounds like you're working on the system and that it has provided efficiencies. It's nice to hear that in terms of the investment in technology has allowed you to have less personnel.
Correct.
But it costs money.
Right.
Still.
And it does cost money. This year, we'll be putting it down at, just to have better accountability. We put it up at the lake a couple of years ago for selling of the passes and things like that to make it convenient for the customer. We're looking into putting it down at our gatehouses where we collect the funds so that we have direct accountability rather than, counting it so that when you pay it, they push the button, it says how much, and it's all accounted for when it comes in and things of that nature. So we are looking into different things.
Just one more follow-up, slightly different in terms of technology, though, the website. I know we've had conversation here about updates to the town website. Will that impact your website at all? Are you working in conjunction with that project or separately?
I was probably one of the drivers behind it.
Thank
If it was moved earlier, I wouldn't have had such a miserable day back in February, whatever it was, when we had our major registration. I'm sure some of you may have talked to some of your neighbors, but it was, my registration didn't go as smooth as we thought. Okay, but now that it's moved over to on different servers at QSEN, they'll be able to handle umpteen calls at one time or access to the computer, to the webpage without crashing.
Great, thank you. That's a wonderful service to the town. Thank you.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. I know it's late, but a quick question on the revolving fund schedule. Is there a way, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, I'm listening.
Is there a way that we could take this $118,000 of credit card fees and for the programs that aren't a part of the revolving fund, that don't pertain specifically to revenue here, carve them out, put them back to the budget book where I think they belong as either an expense to those budgets or maybe as an offset to the revenues from those budget-driven revenues, so that what would be left here would just be the net credit card fees that pertain to the things on this list, which would give a truer picture of the revolving fund itself. Does that make sense to some degree?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I mean,
It might be more work than-
Someone made a decision at one point to include all the fees in the revolving fund, and at the same
Yeah.
time, take money out of the revolving fund. This year, and you look at the history, look where, where the fund is now down where it is, the decision was made, okay, we'll just discontinue the revenue transfer, the funds transfer to the general fund.
Right.
And keep it in, but we can do it, anyway.
Because just a rough look at it, if it was 3%, then your fees would be roughly 35K just for this stuff. So there's probably 80K worth of credit card fees on this schedule that belong elsewhere, give or take some change, right?
Probably more than that.
It's
Yeah.
approximately $70,000 out of the general fund
Right.
budget.
And then if that was the case, you'd be back up over 200K.
Right,
Two and a quarter.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
okay.
Either way.
Either way, it's coming out of the revolving fund. Because if it was over 200K here, we'd transfer it over to
Right.
the town side.
The excess, yeah.
Okay, but the other thing is that the way the system is set up,
Okay.
you use we went through and we did an estimate on our revenues, okay, of
Right.
what came in from the golf course, how much came in by internet,
Right.
how much came over the counter,
Mhm.
and we had to try to put the percentage to that to come out with an estimated amount.
Mhm.
Because when you use a credit card with our system, it just goes into one pot. It doesn't say it doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't say golf course, you know.
Okay. Okay,
So it was a very
maybe-
difficult process.
Yeah, right.
I'm saying, let's try it, leave it the way it is. If I find that the fees are growing, I may have to come back, because the one thing we don't want to do is deplete the way we're running our operations with the revolving account. And we are paying for a lot of programs. We start new programs. And that's why the revolving fund was really first started. And obviously, if you see the number, we'd have to add another $1 million to the general fund budget, okay, to run the programs and operations that we're doing on a pay-to-go basis. And I don't think we want to add another $1 million.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments? We've really covered a vast amount, not just Park and Rec, but the waterfront in here, and actually the golf courses are included in the top cover analysis as well.
Right.
I'm not saying we don't go through those budgets, but this top P&L sheet covers all those activities, correct?
Correct.
So does anybody, we're on page 249, does anyone have any specific comments on page 249 on the Park and Rec Department budget? Mr. Walsh?
Jerry, I've been saying this to all department heads, you've probably heard it, but are in a particularly difficult tax year with the tax increase that's currently proposed. And if we needed to cut your budget, what would be the first area you think would be hit?
Wait, I want to clarify that question. Mr. Lombardo did give us $84,000 off this budget, so are you talking in addition?
If there was
to
additional, yeah, if there was addition. And I appreciate you coming up with that number, Jerry. I can't even tell you how much. I think you're the only department head to date that's come forward with such a prepared number on where you can reduce, which really helps us because it tells me what lines, everything else like that. So I do want to compliment you on that, and also on the P&L, which is extremely helpful.
Thank you. Any other areas, I said, when it comes to the marina, waterfront and marina,
Yeah.
when it comes to the golf courses, okay, is going to affect service.
Yeah.
By affecting my service,
Yes.
it's going to directly affect my revenues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I don't know where else I could cut.
Mhm.
I mean, I could say, yes, I can cut.
Mhm.
Anybody can cut, okay? It's the service that we want to provide and not deplete any revenues, okay? I'm probably one of the only departments, okay, as you all know, that create the amount of revenue and the services. Others are, there's not a lot of revenue going back into the Public Works Department. They provide big services, okay, without bringing in a lot of revenue. So
I guess the
that's
question
why
there is, and I
I'm at a little bit of an advantage when I'm working with my revenues and expenses. We try to operate it, as I tell my staff, we're a business within the town.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way we approach it, as best we can under the governmental guidelines. So I really don't know where I could take more funding without directly affecting the services. For instance, and I'll give you an example. I did cut services at the beaches last year. Okay? It didn't directly affect, many people probably didn't even know it, but it was a minor amount of money. It was approximately $7,500 of reducing the lifeguards 1 hour a day at 3 beaches that are smaller. Okay? But it affects service, and personally affected the way we did business and the calls that we received, not having parking attendants on, we got a lot of people using the parking, so a resident couldn't get in. Why did I buy a $20 sticker? So, it was those type of things. And for $7,500, I really didn't think, I don't wish to go through that again on that, that aspect. Most of you probably didn't even notice that we did that, okay? But those that use those facilities noticed it. And so that's why I'd rather not go through it. And at the golf courses, I have that was mentioned earlier, I presently have a vacancy. Okay? The reason I didn't fill the vacancy is because I am looking at reorganization. I am trying to do more with less, but I have to try it. And I'll give you an example. We presently have 2 foremans, one down at the Par 3, and I have a vacancy foreman at the Smith Richardson. That vacancy position is empty at Smith Richardson. I have taken I now have one foreman, like just for this year, Peter Grace and myself. We looked at how we can try to do more, and we're trying to see whether one foreman we can do both golf courses between he and Peter. The other reason I didn't touch the golf courses is that was mentioned earlier, and that you people 2 years ago asked the chairman of the golf course and myself and the RTM recently. We have been looking at outsourcing the golf courses. We spoke about it. The commission's has given us the go-ahead to look at it. We're doing our due diligence. We're not saying it's the right way to go. We're going to come in with our pros and cons, what's good, what's bad. I was always one against it, and because I think the most knowledge I had was what we saw over at Bridgeport, and we all felt that that wasn't the best way to go. It's the sign of the times, but you have to know what we're going to get. So we are studying it. We're going to have a report, and approximately this time next year or earlier, the commission will make a decision and bring it forward and share it, because we've heard you, okay, we see it, and so that is the reasons I did not elect to try to take any more funding out of the existing budgets, because we are looking at other avenues, and I think that we need to make sure that I can still bring in the amount of revenues that I am.
Mrs. Albin, and then I'll go to Mr. Stone.
Just very quickly, Jerry, when you talk about outsourcing, is Sterling Farms in Stamford, to your knowledge, run by the municipality, or is it outsourced?
It's it's under an enterprise, excuse me, is it enterprise? Authority. It's a golf course authority, okay? Basically, what I'm showing here, if you were to take all the funding out, and, we could make our entities authority, if that's...
Like a parking authority or something like that, correct?
Right. WPA or something of that nature.
Is it a model for you to look at and study?
Yes, and the commission could look at that. That is one avenue. A lot of people think that an authority is... It's just that, in fact. Yes, we could look at it.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Stone.
If you can't cut any money, can you raise some? I'm specifically talking about the marina. From what I understand, there's a waiting list. There's always been a waiting list, and a boat is a luxury. Are we competitive? Have we checked with other, surrounding towns? Can we? Is that one spot where we could raise some money?
You can always raise money if you raise the rates.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
I'm just trying to find my information.
If you don't mind, one of the things on the commission that we're always concerned about is every year we go through an analysis. I've been there, this is my 9th year. We go through an analysis. Jerry will bring to us, for example, the marina fees, to use your example. And Jerry will show us what different towns are doing based on the size of the slip and that type of thing. And we're certainly competitive. We're cheaper than a lot, and we're more expensive than some. But one of the things I wanted to mention, if it's the only thing I mentioned tonight, is as the chairman of the Rec Commission, every time we do that, even though we have a waiting list, we may have a lot of wealthy people on that waiting list, we may be able to raise more revenue. But we always try to think a little bit about how many of the old Fairfield residents and how many Fairfield residents are we going to now exclude once we do that? You know, that's another consideration. There's always, we can always, especially with the boats, we can find people that have more money than the people that are currently in the slips. And can basically, we'll lose people, and then those wealthier people will take over those slips. But every time we raise the rates on anything, we do get a firestorm of people who are maybe not as wealthy, who are saying, okay, you're blocking us out of this. That happened with, it's one of my big concerns about Penfield and the Jackie Durrell building. That, you know, when there's a time when you could rent that building for $300. Now, expenses have gone up, we've had to raise the rates. And yes, we can probably get people from, wealthy people from New York City to rent that place for $1,000 more than we are. But as a commission, we always talk about, but how many Fairfielders are we going to block out of that once we do that? And is it going to get to a point where the very wealthy and out-of-towners are enjoying all our assets, while our middle-income, middle-class, and lower-income Fairfielders are blocked out? So I just want to say that that's a consideration for us, too.
I understand that, but until you try something, you don't know really what the effect is. You're just assuming. And when people have a boat and they use it all the time, you know, they might still be able to use that. They might figure out a way. It's just like when gas prices go up, most people really didn't stop driving their cars. So, you know, we have budget cuts, budget restraints, and we're looking at ways to cut, but we should also be looking on the other side to raise some money. So if you have a real long waiting list, I mean, that's competition.
Just to answer your question, we do do comparison boat rates, okay, of Westport, Greenwich, Stamford, Captain's Cove, which is a private marina, and the Cove Marina in Norwalk. Problem with doing, you can't compare apples to apples in a lot of places because of the way they assess their fees. They do it by per foot, the number of slips they may have, things of that nature. So, but we do a cost comparison.
And where do we come out in that?
I don't have it.
I think Mr. Gallucci raises an excellent point, and I appreciate that point. Anecdotally, and I think this is probably why Mr. Stone brought this up, you know, it's again one of those things you hear out in the community, and sometimes it's inadvertent. It's like, oh man, I'm so happy I just got a slip at the marina, and it's the best deal in the entire state. I'm really thrilled. And every time I'm somewhere and I hear that, I cringe, right? And it's like, I don't mind being affordable. I just don't want to be I don't want to be the low cost provider. If we don't need to be, right? So I've never seen, you know, and again, that's anecdotally. I don't know. That's your guys' responsibility. But I don't know, are we at market? Are we 20% below market? Based on the commentary I hear, my assumption is we're well below market. But I could be totally off on that. I haven't done the study, you know, and that's Mr. DeWitt.
And then I would like.
Thank you, by the way.
Mr. Lombardo, I agree with your statement before about anything we cut revenue, except for one exception, which is your fees and professional services, which is...
On which budget?
I thought we were still in Parks and Rec.
We are, really, but I mean, we've bounced around. It's fair.
Because under that budget, you've got Sherman Green Concert Series, which we're not making revenue off of, right? Police and fire for programs, which I understand probably could be cut. Fireworks in the Memorial Day Parade. So, any thought of ever going into, you know, digging into that $94,000?
Well, that's where I did reduce Memorial Day.
Yep, okay, but you reduced on actuals.
I did
is
reduce.
Different than reduced on...
No, he's reducing on the revised. He's taking $20,000 out of it.
I took $20,000. I took $4,000 from 24.
Took $4,000 off.
From the Memorial Day portion.
But based on actuals, so you've been over budgeting.
Yes, that's right, $4,000.
Pardon?
I said based on actuals. You've been over budgeting it.
But on concerts, okay, I reduced that, okay.
You reduced to 28,000 as well?
No, that was 32, okay.
Okay.
And pass.
But what makes that number go to, I
I'm
guess
lower-
what the
I'm
question,
lessening-
Mr. Walsh's question is,
Reducing the number of concerts.
how does that number go to zero? Is that we start talking to businesses around the green who probably benefit from this concert series more than?
We do get sponsors for some of the concerts.
Uh-huh.
I take in sponsors for some of the concerts, but then I have the children's concerts.
Uh-huh.
Okay? So we offset the children's concerts. In other words, we budget, okay, X amount of dollars. But we run concerts on the greens, we run the other, so we do go out and get sponsorships, okay, to help defray the cost. Otherwise, for the number of concerts and the customers that we're servicing, which is, if you've been down to the Sherman Green anytime, we really do it for the seniors. I mean, we got a host of different people, but we get an awful lot of senior citizens to those greens, to the green, okay? They love it.
The same ones that are emailing us saying cut the budget because it's unaffordable and.
Maybe, but, I don't, see, I could have done that last year and cut where you would have noticed it. I didn't want to, because that's not my job. My job is still to try to provide services, okay? So I tried to come up with creative ways of getting some money, reducing the number of concerts, bringing in a little more revenue, having my staff go and ask for sponsorships, okay? But, again, when I do get a sponsor, yep, they sponsor this for, I'll say, $500. It may have cost us $7. Okay?
Right.
So, but we do that, and I have cut it. I can't cut, the other one, big one in there is the fireworks.
Which is
Okay?
where I was going next, right?
Okay? I think we spoke about that 2 years ago, and this board and the Board of Selectmen said, we're not cutting the Memorial Day Parade, and we're not cutting fireworks.
That was 2 years ago.
Okay. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, but the theme of this whole budget process has been, this is a tough year, and.
I understand that, but.
What can we touch without actually reducing services, right?
Along those lines, if I might interject, because Jerry and I have had some conversations on that. Jerry, do you want to fill us in? You were looking at what the potential sponsorship were, or how some other towns around here handle fireworks.
Right. I did inquire to a couple local banks. I haven't heard back to see if they were interested. One bank I did hear back. He says, that's more than our, he goes, we'll stick with the $1,000 sponsorships.
Peoples, they're going to be collecting our tax money soon.
I'm waiting to hear. I think it's on their desk. But again, we are looking at ways of doing it, okay, because I do have that luxury to try to, do it by other means. But the money's not free-flowing, as we all know.
Yeah, and I guess my comment to that would be, if we budget it, you can look, but there's no real need to go after this hard. I'm not saying that you're not going to go after it hard if there's still money sitting there. If you get a sponsorship, you say, oh, I'll give $39,000 back to Mike at the end of the year and we'll be heroes. That money's not there. We get a sponsorship or we don't do it. I mean, I don't know if we're at that point in our lives yet.
Well, that's a decision this board has to make. I can tell you that if I get sponsorships and I had a commitment from a sponsor, the $39,000 would be cut out of the budget. Okay? Or it would be allocated at smaller numbers to other line items to, okay? If you go through my budget, there's no allocation, okay? And that's why the revolving fund, I try to create new programs.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm being cognizant of the hour.
I'm done. Thank
All right? Mrs. McCarthy V.
Quick follow-up to the marina conversation, and I also appreciate Mr. Galushi's comments, which is, I think, one well taken for the entire budget, not just for Parks and Rec. But I did appreciate the comment about other communities assessing by foot, which might help address the issue of people getting bumped off. It seems the larger the boat, the more expensive the boat. Thank you.
And that goes for all the areas,
Did we have another, Mr. Brockfeld, please?
Before I mention that, I'd just like to say something to you, Jerry. You know, the Sikorsky fireworks show 2013 has a very nice ring to it. I should do it.
Say it right out to the audience.
No problem.
How about Sikorsky Pavilion at Penfield, for that matter?
Well, that's just one more feather in their cap. And Mr. Galucci, I just want to first of all say thank you. You said you've been doing this for 9 years or so on the commission. So thank you for your service. You know, it's wonderful. Just one philosophical comment that I'd like to point out. And Jerry, you've opened up interesting, possibilities tonight. So a lot of things we're talking about don't only apply to your department, but when it comes to the marina and the boat slips, I just want to push back a bit on what Mr. Galucci said a little bit, though, because this is a thing I feel strongly about. There is something to be said, I guess, for keeping the boat slips affordable or whatever it is you were trying to say for some of the long-time residents. But I just want to make clear that when we underprice something for a small number of people, and I assume we only have, 50, 100, 200 slips. I don't have any idea. I'm not a boater.
But probably 800.
Okay, so, we
that's
by
the number.
definition, every dollar that we save for some boat owner who has been there a while, as well-intentioned as it sounds, is a dollar that's borne by 58,000 people in town that are literally subsidizing them. And, it's one thing when we subsidize education, right, because that's something that benefits thousands and thousands of children and homeowners, and obviously, contributes to the perception of Fairfield being a great community and so forth. Whereas something specialized like a golf course or a tennis court or a marina is a specialized item that benefits few people relatively. And that's why I think that those items should be priced more towards market prices rather than asking the people of Fairfield to subsidize specialty items. That's all. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I just don't think it applies to something like a boat slip.
I just want to say that I do appreciate your point, and I do see the distinction, but again, I don't want to repeat myself because it is late, but the commission always thinks about some of the other ends of it, because while you're making a good example there, for example, with the rentals at Jackie Durrell and Penfield, everybody was all excited about all these great, wonderful wedding bookings we got before the storm hit us. I wasn't that excited about it. It was good revenue, but we could see who was renting it. It wasn't Fairfielders. It was people from all over the place who saw a beautiful building with a beautiful view, who could outbid our own residents, basically. And I see the distinction. I mean, I do. I think you made a good point. There's a difference between having a big boat in a slip and trying to have your wedding or a birthday party or a teacher's event or town employees, many of whom have also been boxed out of that place now. So all I'm saying is it's a consideration. It's not just simply we can get more money. We know, and we have to keep thinking about trying to be competitive. But we also have in the back of our mind those people in our town who would like to enjoy some of this stuff too, and we don't want to totally box them out. Because if we make it a total market thing, for example, we have a locker lottery and I want to keep going, but we have a locker lottery every year. Those people are desperate for those lockers. Now, I don't know how many we have, maybe 150, 160, 200 and something. We can find 200 really rich people in Fairfield and Southport who will give us a lot of money for those lockers. Should we? Well, maybe you feel like we should raise it to $1,000 and the 220 wealthiest people in town will have a locker. But the people on the commission sort of feel like, well, we'd like it, we need to charge some money for it, but we'd like it to be affordable for the middle-class average Fairfielder to be able to have a locker. So it's just a consideration is what I'm saying. And I'm hearing your point, I'm rethinking it a little bit in terms of the boats, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again for your service. Mr. Walsh?
And, Mr. Galucci, I kind of agree with you and to some extent, and it's kind of the opposite point because, there are 800 slips. It's a lot of slips. And
I believe that's the number. Don't hold me to it. I believe that's the
approximately
number.
800. And everybody does have a chance to get in the lottery eventually and get a slip at some point. But we could also make the same analogy to Penfield Beach. And we could say that it's not free to go to Penfield Beach. We could say it's $100. We could make the parking slip $100 or $200 We may raise a lot of money, and we probably sell a lot of permits. But we don't, because it's our shorefront, and that's one of the reasons people move here and pay taxes here. And I think that's somewhat similar to our harbor. Some people don't like to go to the beach, but they like to go on a boat. And I think that we shouldn't try to maximize the price just because it should go to the people who could afford it the most. I think there's a balancing act, and I think the Commission's done a great job with the balancing act, because I think it's a very tough thing to do, and I think you do it very well. And you can make the argument that we're one of the cheaper ones or whatever. I would hate to hear that we're one of the most expensive ones.
Well, and I think that there's a difference between maximizing and staying within market. And I don't think you want to be the top of the market, but I don't think you want the market way up here and then hearing we're the best deal in the tri-state area. I think because then I think that's a decision that's been made, to Mr. Brockfeld's point, without consideration of the 50,000 other people or the other residents. So I do agree that there's a balance to be had. And the only thing I ask is that there's a market study done routinely, and wherever the market is, we know exactly, what we're trying to do. And for that matter, it'd be a very good discussion to have, saying, what are we giving up to do that? So that hey, we could price it at this, but we've elected not to for the very legitimate reasons that you raise for certain areas, as opposed to keeping things artificially low without maybe having done the homework. And I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting I haven't seen the homework, and I'm reacting to the anecdotal comments that I get out in the public. And that's all. That's my point on it. Thank you. Anybody else? Let's do the flip. I mean, we have covered a lot of these, and Mr. Grace, thank you for being here. You might be getting off easy tonight, sir. You were here prior to. So we had the waterfront and the marina, just page 251 and 252. Any questions, comments on that? We have the Carl Dickman Golf Course. I kind of love saying that, actually. 253 through 255. Do we have any additional comments on that? We have the full P&L. Real quick, please.
Which foreman is not being staffed? You said you have a foreman opening at...
It's at H. Smith Richardson.
Okay. So this is valid.
Correct.
So when we get to H. Smith Richardson, there's a foreman, that number is in there.
Not entirely, but I'll explain it
All
when
right.
we get there.
And then we have does anybody have any comments on the Dickman Golf Course? And then we have Smith Richardson, which is 256 through 259. Any comments on that? I think we have one. So Mr. Lombardo on the foreman.
Foreman's position of 62,000 is really, it's probably, and I don't have the number broken down because I wasn't expecting that question, but it's probably more around 58,000 because I did do some reorganization when I'm doing this, and I upgraded.
You're not speaking into the microphone.
I'm sorry. It's getting late. I've when I did my reorganization, I moved some funds around to promote other people within the organization. So,
Your intent is to fill that role.
My intent is to fill that role.
You're going to go back to, as we've been talking about many times here the last couple of weeks, if it's I don't know how you labor grade or whatever like that, it's going to be
Right.
an entrance level into that labor grade.
Depending on qualifications of the individual.
Real simple. Do we have some money to cut here?
No.
Well, that was too simple. Let me ask it again. This is over budgeted.
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Could you, please?
Yes.
And
Because
we
I don't
appreciate-
have the number. I wasn't expecting that.
Okay.
I tried to anticipate what you guys were going to ask, and
You did an excellent job.
so.
Thank you. If we could get that number, just because it was raised. Any other
Well,
questions?
July 1st.
Any other questions on Smith Richardson Golf Course? Seeing none, I'm going to, oh, please, Mr. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith goes to Fairfield.
I went to
Mr. Stone, right.
On the capital request, everything was cut out. And I'm just looking at the first one, the mower, that we had a controversy with last year, right?
No, we didn't have controversy. We got that.
You got that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason the funding was cut,
And
it was
you're
on,
confident, I mean, you're all right with it?
it was on my recommendation to the first selectman, because of the fact that, A, we were showing you what we need, what we will need. However, since we're looking into the outsourcing of we're investigating the outsourcing of the golf course, I didn't wish to purchase new equipment, okay, if we follow through on outsourcing the golf course. It just didn't make financial sense to me. So we're holding off, okay, to find out which avenue we're going to take. And we'll have a report and a recommendation from the commission, provided the commission wishes to go that way once they see all the information. And then we would come back to this board.
I appreciate that. That's a wise choice.
Mr. Walsh?
I don't know through you or Mr. Grace, if this decision takes a while or it doesn't happen, do we have these pieces of equipment, they're just older, that we're going to be replaced, or do we know how to have enough pieces of equipment to operate properly throughout the next year?
Oh, it's through me. No, it's through me. We have the equipment.
Okay.
Okay.
So
We have the
nothing here
equipment.
nothing here is something that broke or we don't have or we need?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll go to the public on anything having to do with the Ford Park and Recreation.
Showed up.
Your fan club is here. All right. Back to the board, nothing. All right. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for and I apologize for the lateness of the hour. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. And you have a good rest of the evening. Yeah. All right. We're done for the evening. It's a programming note, 9:30 on Saturday morning at the Senior Center is kickoff. Please do not be late. I will be bringing the food. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Haven't decided yet. Anything else? Do I have a motion? Mr. Polito, do I have a second? I'm going to go with Mr. Brockfeld. All in favor of adjournment? Those opposed, abstentions? Good night, everybody.